Okay, I'd like to call the meeting back to order.
Yeah, anytime. You let me know. Okay. Thanks, Bishop. Jerry.
Okay, we are now back in session. If I can have everybody's attention. We're going to be starting with the two deputations who couldn't make it just before lunch. Sarah Clemenhaga and Jacob Meyer. I'm going to be doing a presentation together. You're getting some time off school there this afternoon, Jacob? Yeah. Okay, part of your civic lesson? Yeah. Okay. Oh, can I just have the
Can you hear me now, I think?
timer turned on?
Oops.
Just one sec, just
Yeah, no problem.
from the tech, I need the timers turned on.
Sorry. I want to make sure this isn't talking yet.
Oh, don't worry about it. We're just give it a sec.
Okay.
It's all yours whenever you're ready.
Thank you. Hello, councillors. Hello, councillors. Thank you for giving us the opportunity to speak, and thank you for listening to all the deputants. I've been to the budget meetings for the past 2 days and today, and I've heard what you've heard. And I know and I appreciate that it is a very difficult and complex job to create this budget. And I appreciate what you've done so far. But I cannot choose 1 or 2 or even 3 or 4 items from this budget. I know you have heard from a lot of people, and you'll continue to hear from a lot more today, but I still wanted to bring you a few more voices because these are the people who have the time and the resources and who have been able to come and speak to you. But there are a host of other Torontonians who just aren't able to do that. So I brought voices of a tiny fraction of those, and I'm going to show you that on this video. It's a very short video. Keep the timer running.
I'm Brian Young, and I'm deeply, deeply concerned about climate change. It's coming at us faster than a freight train, and we need to put serious money into it for serious action.
My name is Christine, and I would like to see a Toronto budget that supports local artists.
My name is Dee, and I'm a retired teacher. I was shocked to learn that 1 out of 4 Toronto children live in poverty. This is unacceptable. Children don't learn when they're stressed and undernourished. The poverty reduction strategy should be funded in the 2018 budget.
Hi, my name's Nadine and I live in the outskirts of Scarborough. I've lived here on and off for the past 30 years. Over these years, it still takes me the same amount of time, over an hour, to get to the downtown Toronto core. My wish for the city is better public transportation, faster, more convenient, more accessible. Thank you.
I like the 2-hour free transfer, so it's easier to get to school, easier to just use the TTC in general.
That room should be made within the budget for supportive housing and for help to seniors. I'm 61, and I think that when I'm 65, I fear that I will be living in greater poverty than I'm living in now.
I lived in supported housing for the best part of 3 decades in Toronto. Now I have my own bachelorette apartment, and I can't help but think of people still living in boarding homes that don't have the opportunity to be self-sufficient like I am.
The city needs to make ample and affordable childcare a priority for the city's economic and social well-being in the 2018 budget.
My name is Aidan. I think public transit should be more affordable.
I'd like to see council members focus more on Toronto City housing, youth opportunities, and of course, climate change. Now, these are things that are very important to our economy and very important to our nation.
But it's so hard. I'm locked in this cycle here that I can't seem to get out of, that I can't get far enough ahead to try and do anything about it. Apparently I'm on the list for subsidized housing, but it's been 6 years now, and I guess I'm still not a priority.
Thank you. So it's the children and the youth who are going to live with the ramifications of this budget. So that's why I brought my son here.
Hi, I'm Jacob Meyer, and I wanted my voice to be heard on what I think the city should be funding. So first off, I think the TTC should receive a lot more funding, so I'm not late for school if I miss one bus and have to wait 30 minutes after for another one to come. Secondly is our housing issue. It's wrong when I see people suffering in the streets of my own neighborhood. Everyone needs a place to live. Thirdly is climate change. I want my city to address the massive problem of climate change, inspiring others to do the same. And I want to know, most importantly, that the younger generation will have a green future, like my little brother and my sister. Finally is our parks and rec programs. As a child, I learned to skate and swim through our parks and rec programs, and I want every child to have that opportunity. Overall, I feel we need to share our resources and reduce poverty in the city. Thank you. Thanks so much.
So please don't make us choose to fund climate change instead of poverty, or transit instead of parks, or childcare versus nutrition. There is tremendous wealth at the city. There are other revenue tools available. There are even ways to use the money that we already have. So to me, the good news is we can create a budget that meets the needs of our residents and of our city. Where there's political will, there is a way. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your deputation. Councillor Layton.
Thank you very much, and thank you for coming in. I think that you've put together, Jacob, a good list of the priorities that our city needs to focus on, many of which we've made announcements on over the past year, and unfortunately have fallen into the column that is to go unfunded if we are to stick to a pledge that the mayor made, essentially, to the electorate, and has been codified into this budget by way of his budget direction that was adopted by not a majority of council. I wouldn't say unanimously council. What we're looking for is essentially we will need to identify new resources, and as you've outlined, where there is will, there is a way. But what would you suggest would be the mechanisms that we should be using to draw on the additional resources?
I would really, really like to participate in that discussion, and I think a lot of people have very good ideas about that, and I think there's a lot of evidence and a lot of different choices we could make. So I think we need to just say right now what we need, and then it would be a separate discussion to talk about what we are willing to do, but I'm open to everything at this point. Personally, I'm willing to pay more. I'm willing to see changes in how we spend money. I'm willing to do a lot of things. So, but I think I think you would get really creative, interesting ideas from people if you came to them and said, "Hey, we're in trouble. We need to figure out a new way of doing things. What do you suggest?"
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Carroll.
Yes, thanks. You were here before lunch as well, Sarah. So
right.
We started the conversation just before we broke for lunch about the fact that we don't consult before we draft a budget, and so we don't even really know what people's priorities are. Would you be surprised to learn that we haven't even sat alone together as a group of councillors and really asked each other what we share in common as 44 or soon 47 people. What are our priorities? We haven't even had that sort of strategic discussion.
I am surprised, but I also think, wow, that's great, because there's an opportunity to do things differently next year. And I also think having the budgeting participation before you do the budget would be great. And finally, I don't think you should even approve a policy unless you're approving the funding at the same time. You should say, no, we can't fund, we're not doing Transform TO. Say that. And then everyone can say, oh, don't do it. But don't say, yeah, we're doing it, and then make people come and spend their time asking for money, please.
Yes, yes. We were talking about it offline before breaking for lunch, and one of our own staff members was likening it to it's more like the online shopping experience. We're putting things in the shopping cart, and then we're not proceeding to check out.
Right, right, exactly.
Yeah. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, and thank you very much for your deputation. Next is Gideon Foreman.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, committee members. I am Gideon Foreman. I'm a policy analyst at the David Suzuki Foundation. Much appreciate you giving me the opportunity to speak today. I'm here to speak briefly, and I won't use my full 5, I don't think, about 2 issues. One is the Transform TO climate plan, and the second is bicycle lanes. Needless to say, we're very pleased that Council passed a climate plan last summer to help the city meet its 80% target. The plan is bold, it's ambitious, it will have many co-benefits. By improving transportation, for example, it will not only tackle climate change, but also improve air quality and help to bust traffic congestion. The urgency of climate change, and I think we can all agree on this, cannot be overstated. And we don't need to look far to see its effects. Right in our own city, we're witnessing more extreme weather, including the recent record-breaking cold, -23 the other day, and of course the Toronto Islands flooding last summer. We are gratified that staff are requesting a 2018 expenditure on the climate plan of over $3 million. I've had some discussions with staff. There are different figures, but $3 to $4 million is the range I'm hearing. And I think that is a good start, but to properly address the issue and literally save residents' lives, we do need to fund Transform TO more generously. And that means, in our view, following the original request and raising the 2018 investment to $6.7 million. Again, it's important to note that this investment will have a multiplier effect, bringing a range of benefits, including job creation, greater home comfort as we insulate our residences, and an easier commute as we reduce congestion. If we underfund Transform TO, as we're on a trajectory to do, we'll have to defer hiring of new staff. Rather than having them in place this month, as you know originally was planned, we won't see many of them until this summer, and some won't be working before spring 2019. But with an issue as urgent as climate change, we can't wait another 6 months or a year. We need those staff in place right away, in our view. We're delighted that Council is committed to a cycling network plan that will see the creation of bike lanes across the city. The plan is currently slated to be complete within 10 years. But we're wondering why Torontonians should wait this long. Recent polling from the Angus Reid Forum shows 80%, 4 out of 5, of Toronto residents support a safe network of bike lanes. Surely something this popular shouldn't take a decade to complete. We're suggesting that you increase funding for the cycling plan and complete it in just 5 years. That would give Torontonians the full benefits of a cycling-friendly city, including cleaner air, better health, less traffic, not in 2026, but at the end of the next council term. Toronto will never be a leading 21st century city in our view unless it seriously reduces greenhouse gas emissions and rolls out active transportation infrastructure. Proper funding can make this a reality in short order, and we believe all Torontonians would be the beneficiaries. Thank you.
Thank you. Seeing no other questions? Next will be Paul.
Thank you.
Paul Anstey.
Hello, my name is Paul Ansa. I live in Ward 17, and I want to thank you for this opportunity to speak. I'm here to urge that the Budget Committee recommend full funding for Transform TO, the Climate Action Plan that Council adopted unanimously this past July. There are many reasons to fund this plan, but here are two that I find especially compelling. To see the first reason, we need only open our eyes. The words climate emergency, once dismissed as an alarmist cry, now describe a simple fact of life, mirrored in new headlines almost every week. We all know someone who's been affected. This past October, my brother called from California to tell me that his son and family had safely escaped the firestorm that swept down on Santa Rosa, though only after fleeing their home in the small hours of the morning. That was just one in a series of unprecedented superfires that devastated swaths of BC and California this year, as they did Fort McMurray in 2016. Hurricanes and floods in many parts of the world have been recurring stories as well. Closer to home, we've had our own bouts of extreme weather, including the Toronto ice storm of 2013 and last summer's heavy rains that closed down the Toronto Islands. Without urgent action, events like this will only become more frequent and destructive. What can we do? Well, given that cities account for 70% of worldwide greenhouse gas emissions, and that Canada's current per capita emissions are among the highest in the world, we here in Toronto can do a great deal. As Canada's largest city, our actions will inevitably set an example for others to follow. So this is our chance to lead. Last July, Council took a first step toward assuming that leadership by throwing its full support behind Transform TO and its well-crafted plan to bring our emissions down 80% by 2050. But since the plan is only as sound or robust as its funding, the really critical step has yet to be taken, and it's the one lying before you now. I urge you to recommend full funding for Transform TO, not just because it's the right thing to do, but because anything less would be a retreat from our city's duty of leadership in a time of real emergency. Now, there's a second reason to fully fund the plan, but this one begins with an objection. What about the cost? Well, let's consider that cost. The full amount proposed for the Transform TO actions in the enhanced business cases for 2018 is $2.5 million, certainly a tiny drop in the city's near $11 billion budget for the year, and actually roughly equal to 1 loonie for every individual resident in Toronto. To be sure, even small amounts should be spent prudently. In this case, however, we are looking at money that's not simply expended, but rather invested in building a new low-carbon version of our city. Like any other investment, this one brings returns, including such intangibles as a healthier, more accessible and livable urban environment. But the monetary returns shown by economic models are even more compelling, some $14 for each dollar spent. In addition, the plan's various actions are projected to generate a wide array of durable, good quality jobs in such areas as construction, design, electrical engineering, and communications, with total new employment over the plan's life being estimated at somewhere near 327,000 person hours per year. According to my own rough calculations, that would come out to something like 10,000 new long-term jobs. Of course, investing less or investing it later would bring corresponding losses. What's more, because of the elements of the plan are so tightly integrated, small cuts could undermine all those returns in surprisingly big ways. In other words, this investment's big returns depend on funding it fully. So in sum, I urge this committee to recommend full funding of Transform TO, first because it's an excellent, well-thought-out plan, and funding it fully is the right response to an unprecedented worldwide climate emergency. And secondly, because it presents an outstanding opportunity to create a better, healthier, more livable city, even as it brings us enviable financial returns and an impressive surge in new jobs, gains we can realize only by funding it fully. I see I have a few seconds left, and I want to use them simply to add my own voice to others that we have already heard today, who have lamented the absolutely appalling competition in which initiatives like ours, those for TO Prosperity, for a number of other excellent new steps are placed, in which we are all, in effect, competing for the same tiny spot in the sun and a chance to be financed. We shouldn't have to do this. We should not be in this situation. To me, this is an indictment of the way the city does its budget planning, and it seems to me we need something different that in fact provides an opportunity for Toronto to be a place of both vision and leadership.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for your deputation. Next is Lee Adamson.
Hello. My name is Lee Adamson, and I've lived in Ward 17 for 32 years. And I'd like to thank the Budget Committee for the opportunity to talk to you today. And I'm making a deputation today because I feel very strongly that we must fully fund Transform TO's climate change plan in this year's budget. Now, I realize there's many important and urgent demands in the budget. However, I believe that funding the Transform TO climate change plan is quite doable at a cost of less than $1 per resident in Toronto, that implementing the plan offers many benefits beyond fighting climate change, including job creation, energy innovation, better transit, and overall a greener, cleaner, more equitable city. And finally, that fighting climate change is an essential investment for a livable future. So for these reasons, Transform TO really needs to be fully funded in this year's budget. Now, I personally feel very strongly about this because I'm very worried about climate change and the unpredictable and extreme weather events it's causing here in Toronto and around the world. And as others have mentioned, in Toronto, we've experienced severe and costly flooding, ice storms, and last year, this unprecedented long spell of extreme cold, creating life-threatening emergencies for our homeless. And worldwide, climate change is threatening everyone, everywhere. Unprecedented droughts in California, floods in Texas, forest fires in British Columbia, loss of Arctic ice, and permafrost melting in our north. We know that these adverse weather events will only continue to get more extreme, more frequent, and more costly until globally we stop producing the greenhouse gases that are heating the planet. Thankfully, in Paris in 2015, our mayor and leaders the world over acknowledged this reality, stepped up, and made commitments to tackle this urgent problem. In June of this year, Mayor Tory reiterated his resolve to stay the course and reduce Toronto's greenhouse gas emissions as promised in Paris. In July, City Council unanimously supported the Transform TO plan to transition Toronto to a low-carbon city by 2050. This is all fabulous news. But now, at budget time, it's time to make it happen. The Transform TO plan is an excellent, comprehensive, integrated plan, the outcome of extensive community consultation, engineering, and modeling studies. It is poised to set Toronto on a course to meet its Paris commitments. But to do that, it must be fully funded. Now, I don't know about you, but for me, it's really hard to listen to the news, to hear the weather reports, to just sit and wait for disaster to unfold, to feel powerless. But as a city, as a community, we're not powerless. We have a plan. We can transform TO. So let's turn fear into hope and despair into action and get the job done. To do it, we need full funding for the Transform TO climate change plan in this year's budget. Bigger storms are brewing. We don't have any time to lose. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Next is Ann Russell.
Good afternoon. My name is Ann Russell, and I'm a resident of Ward 20. I'm also a Green Neighbors group organizer and a healthcare professional. As we enter 2018, Toronto faces many challenges and opportunities, and we need a budget that addresses homelessness, our inadequate shelter system, and meets our public health needs, as well as making transit accessible for everyone. These are all things that I would ask this committee to ensure are adequately funded in the 2018 budget. I would specifically like to focus on today to strongly urge the committee to support full funding of Transform TO. I thank the committee for the opportunity to speak to this critically important issue. I believe that as a large international city, Toronto has a moral obligation to be a climate leader and to make good on its commitments to the global community to reduce carbon emissions. I am also convinced that the costs of inaction on climate change far outweigh the costs of proactive strategies to mitigate climate change as proposed in Transform TO programs. Devastation by extreme weather events, as we've been talking about, is in the news with ever more frequency around the world, and Torontonians have also been experiencing the effects of climate change. We know that businesses and homeowners in Toronto suffered damages and financial losses as a result of the flooding last summer. In the summer of 2016, we heard in the news about seniors who were trapped in sweltering apartments during a seemingly never-ending heat wave. Over the last few weeks, extreme cold has made it more dangerous and potentially fatal to be homeless in Toronto. In the December 2013 ice storm, it cost the city $106 million and Torontonians $200 million in insurance losses. By comparison, the less than $2.5 million that is being asked for in the 2018 budget for Transform TO programs is a tiny amount. As we've said, less than $1 per Torontonian. Transform TO programs will not only reduce our carbon emissions, but have critical social benefits. Local green jobs, reduced health costs, poverty reduction, and overall improvement of the quality of life for all Torontonians. The climate crisis requires all hands on deck if we are going to have any chance of ensuring that in 30 years from now, we have a planet that is still able to support human life. It is that critical. It's the most urgent challenge facing human civilization. $2.5 million doesn't seem like much to dedicate to fighting the crisis, but our actions in concert with the actions of local governments around the world will ultimately determine whether we meet the challenge. In my Green Neighbors group, I am so inspired by the energy, vision, and commitment that so many Torontonians have to making their neighborhoods greener and more livable places. I'm inspired by the Grange Community Association and the Harvard Village Residents Association that have developed ambitious neighborhood green plans. I'm also inspired by the owners of For Life Natural Foods in Kensington Market who want to build a greenhouse to grow local foods on their rooftop. At the same time, I'm quite heartened by the stories I hear about challenges facing groups that want to get green projects off the ground, whether it be negotiating city bylaws, maintaining volunteer capacity, raising funds, or generally accessing the information and resources they need to move forward with their plans. In my vision of Toronto, neighborhood groups, organizations, and individuals across the city would have easy access to the resources they need to work with city officials to make their green projects a reality. Funding Transform TO programs in 2018 can make that vision possible. Seriously addressing the climate crisis at the city level means having a collaborative approach across all departments where every decision and policy should be preceded by the question, will this action help to reduce our carbon emissions? Funding Transform TO programs is a necessary step in beginning that process. Some of the Transform TO programs that were proposed for last year have been delayed because funding was not provided in 2017, and we can afford to delay no longer. In closing, I strongly urge this committee to recommend full funding to Transform TO in the 2018 operating budget as a matter of both ethical and financial responsibility to the global community and the citizens of Toronto. Thank you.
Thank you. Next is Jeff Cattell.
And Kathy McDonald.
Oh, okay, and Kathy too, yep. Yours.
Good afternoon, committee. Wow, you've had a smorgasbord of very interesting and promising submissions, and our submission this afternoon from the Federation of North Toronto Resident Associations is, you'd say, well, why are we talking about city planning? You know, how does that relate to stuff like poverty reduction and climate change? Well, actually, it is related because it's about responsibly managing our city and building a city that is safe and promotes equality and health and economic growth. It's about responsible city building, and that's, so we're going to talk about a couple things. One is about some issues with city planning, and secondly, some broader issues around supporting the some of the plans that need to be funded that will support responsible city building. So first of all, city planning. We understand the importance of a vital and active planning function. It's about the long-term health of stable residential neighborhoods and the whole city. There are planning activities, longer-term planning activities such as avenue studies, secondary plans, zoning bylaws, updates, heritage conservation district studies, neighborhood guidelines are urgently required, yet the waiting lists for these studies are long. The City Planning Division is swamped by site-specific applications, including ZBAs and minor variance and consent applications. So meeting these processing requirements and deadlines inevitably pushes down the priority given to citywide and area planning. Notably, the secondary plans that need to take into account transportation and need for schools, social service requirements, and so on. So some of these studies are simply not able to be funded, and any but the most critical are being funded right now. And so the planning for the city to cope with future growth is suffering. The lack of updated secondary plans with clear population targets and densities and development guidelines necessarily means that too many planning decisions are left to be determined by the Ontario Municipal Board and its successor organization. We're not opposed to growth, but we are opposed to growth beyond what can be supported by Toronto's current and planned infrastructure. Development's effectively out of control right now in the downtown and midtown portions of our city, and there's an urgent need for a formulation of an updated official plan for development controls that are in line with provincial population targets, new provincial policies regarding development near transit stations coming out of Bill 139, and available infrastructure. Doing so requires resources, notably more staff. The 2018 preliminary budget, what does it do for planning? Well, there's one significant change, the addition of 12 positions to the Committee of Adjustment in order to bring the number of applications being reviewed per staff member closer to 100 applications per employee, which is the benchmark. We would strongly support this minimal additional staffing to deal with consents and minor variances. But as we've said, it doesn't deal with some of the bigger plans. So we would recommend that City Council provide additional funds in the City Planning Division budget to accelerate proactive planning of Toronto's development. I'll hand over to Kathy.
Yeah, so I wanted to add some comments about the responsible city building and particularly highlighting what previous speakers have very eloquently addressed, the need to fund Transform TO as a critical, really critical program for our city, and it really needs to get underway and properly funded. The other program, the Toronto Poverty Reduction Strategy, is also really critical for our city, and as we've seen
issues coming from sort of lack of funding and the current issue about housing the homeless during the really cold weather. But there's a lot more to it, of course, than that. And I see a key part is developing the community benefits framework for the city to increase community well-being, job opportunities for residents. And this is currently stalled, and that's a real tragedy for our city. We recognize the program that the city really does have a serious revenue problem, and we need to be looking at funds that are responsibly sourced. We believe that the revenue measures shouldn't be just assessed from a financial perspective or for their ease of administration, but also for their contribution to city building, so that they align with official plan objectives, such as reducing the need for car travel, encouraging really mixed-use development that's transit and walking and bike friendly, that's green. And so looking at increasing parking taxes and looking at ways of increasing property taxes to benefit the city and increase our prosperity and livability. So therefore, we're recommending that City Council follow through with funding for implementation of these previously approved major commitments, and to consider the contribution to city building in establishing these priorities.
Thank you. Councillor Carroll.
Yes, I just wanted to one of your latest points there, the parking tax. I'm interested in that because you represent a number of ratepayers associations, and in our initial discussion about this, it sort of fell apart over the sort of there's sort of a built-in inequity there. There are lots of shopping centers downtown where there are parkades where you pay to park. And it kind of got stopped in its tracks, the discussion, really by the lobbying of shopping center, suburban shopping developers saying, well, we would have to charge for parking even in the suburbs. But in fact, they already do. You can pay to park at Fairview Mall, and there's valet parking here, there, and everywhere. You represent a number of different ratepayers associations where people sort of live on the edge of the suburbs and would be able to avail themselves of both. Has parking tax been discussed in those organizations?
Yes.
And they're supportive of them? They'd be willing to say, whatever is the downloaded impact to us, we think it's a way for you to ask those businesses to help fund the city?
We think that's an important area to investigate further.
Okay, excellent.
Yeah, the other aspect of that inequity is between main streets and the large parking lots of the private,
Right.
like coming from
We're all
Leaside,
paying display
you know,
parking.
Bayview, you're paying to park, and over, you know, a few meters away, you have no charge over at the Smart Center. So I think people recognize that's fairly inequitable.
I probably wouldn't have asked this question, except that over Christmas, it was the first year where we really started to use the parking for pay at Fairview Mall, and everyone was using it because they knew they were going to find a spot in there. No one was screaming injustice. They just paid and went inside. Yeah, thank you. Thank you. Okay.
Thank you. Councillor Burnside.
Thank you. Through you, I just want to understand that, so it's Fontra's position that we should raise property taxes?
The question hasn't been levied.
I thought that was what was...
Yeah. No, we have, I mean, I think it's something that is the city has to responsibly look at. It hasn't been something that has been voted on and signed on the dotted line by all our residents associations. We certainly talked about it. I mean, there's sort of concern that our property taxes are much lower than any of the surrounding municipalities. And we certainly have properties that are worth a lot of money and that people can pay, and whether there's a way of looking at, what the property tax structure is to ensure that the sort of any increases are equitable. So I'm also interested in the tax policy for discussion and decisions about 401 Richmond Street, and how does that work? So our city is getting more complicated, and simple rules may not need to be really looked at, I think.
Yes, absolutely. There are a lot of different issues that keep cropping up. But I just want to summarize. I just want to make sure I understand that at this point, your organization does not have an official position.
No.
Okay. Will you, and you are discussing it, will you be coming out with an official position? Do you anticipate that, or are you even able to say?
Well, this issue of revenue sources was kind of yesterday's issue, right? Now it's coming back not as an official issue. It's an issue that we need to bring to the forefront again, right?
Right, yeah, no,
I mean, there was
papers
being discussed back in 2015 on revenue tools, and we weighed in on it at that time. But now it's only coming back because people are bringing it back. The city's not officially discussing it.
No, which I understand. My question, maybe I'm not being clear. Let me just repeat it again. My question was, will you, no, I'm not, that's fine. You don't have an official position. I understand that. The second part of my question is, do you anticipate having an official position? And if so, when would you anticipate having one? And if the answer is you don't know, that's fine.
Well, I think the answer is when the city asks, what is the public, what is the public's view officially on that, right? That's what I'm saying. They haven't asked.
Well, we're asking for people's views right now on a whole range of issues, one of which, this is a budget, and people are bringing forth those positions. And I thought your organization is bringing forth suggestions. No?
Well, yes, and I'm saying we're broadly supportive of looking at revenue sources, and we haven't surveyed our members, as Kathy said, specifically on a property tax increase. As you know, there's a whole range of possible measures like gas taxes, parking taxes, entertainment taxes, hotel taxes, as well as property taxes.
No, I was just wondering if you were going to.
And there's a recognition increasingly that there's a revenue problem that has to be addressed in order to fund the urgent needs as presented by deputants today.
Thank you. Next will be Tony Bola. Is Tony here? Tony Bola. Mohammed Hashim. These were a few additions. There were little errors that the clerk made when they did the list, so these were just included in between those. So we'll be doing, after Mohammed, we'll be doing Judy Wieland. There's a little different what's on the green sheets. It was just there were a few clerical errors that we had to deal with. Okay, continue. You have 5 minutes.
Good afternoon. Hi, my name is Mohammed Hashim. I'm the senior organizer at the Toronto York Region Labour Council.
And I'm Maureen O'Reilly. I'm the chair of the Municipal Committee for the Toronto and York Region Labour Council.
There are 3 things that I wanted to quickly touch upon. Revenue tools, the Imagination, Manufacturing, Innovation and Technology Program, formerly known as TEAGS, and a little bit about political leadership. With the dedication of activists, community leaders, and members of council, we have passed a number of aspirational plans that have the capacity to move us all forward. The Labour Council was one of the 50 community signatories to the Poverty Reduction Plan. We helped shape and transform TO, and we strongly have spoken in favor of the anti-Black racism strategy. We have advocated time and time again for us as a city to move to prove that our leadership is more than just words and paper, but also in deeds. It is not enough for us to aspire to a better society. We must make it truly a reality. The city needs more money to do so. You know, every year we dig into our reserves, we rely on hypothetical assumptions of the land transfer tax, but really we have not really moved the bar on how to actually sell a better society and raise revenues to make it happen. We have not provided a vision that allows Torontonians to feel that they can pay more in order to have more. There are a number of clearly available options for dealing with this budget dilemma, two of which fall under an approach of tax fairness. Last year, we advocated for the adoption of a commercial parking levy, which is within the scope of the city's available revenue tools, according to the city's own KPMG report. This could raise tens of millions of dollars, even with exemptions for small businesses and strip plazas, and figuring out what the daily rate would be for the charge that one could have for a parking spot. There's still a significant amount of revenue that's on the table that we walked away from. It was rejected apparently because it would just take too long to implement, and because the mayor had already landed on road tolls as the preferred revenue tool. And after the province reneged on the road toll option, nothing else has really happened. So we're a year or so, a year and a half away from when we spoke about the commercial parking levy at the first as an option, and we said no to it, but yet we still haven't moved anything else. The question remains, at what point do we stop looking for excuses of things not to do and actually do something, which could spread the source of revenues by taking some of the wealthiest landowning corporations in Canada and having them contribute. The other major area of concern is the massive costs of the IMIT program to city revenues. In late 2017, the Labour Council submitted a position paper to the IMIT review, and then again to the Economic Development and Cultural Divisional Plan, where we criticized the expanded use of the IMIT program. We know that creating employment in the city is incredibly important. We agree that incentivizing economic growth is an excellent idea. However, we are concerned about three main things: the types of business who are now receiving support from the TEAGS program, the lack of City Council oversight of grant approval, and the speed by which the program has expanded. In 2008, when created, the program was designed to support struggling industries such as film and manufacturing. However, now access to the program has been given to office towers located downtown to renovate and further build up. It's astonishing to imagine that we as taxpayers of Toronto are always reducing services but increasing tax breaks to major corporations who are making a ton of money and are also benefiting from skyrocketing land values. We're essentially subsidizing their profits. According to the city's projections of the IMIT grants approved and under consideration, according to the city's own report in May 2016, the city will walk away from $475 million, which is almost $500 million in potential tax revenue between the years of 2011 and 2031.
The last point we want to make is, say we have an $11 billion budget, and of that, the city is setting aside $41 million for equity-seeking groups and climate change solutions, such as Transform TO. In the same year, where the IMIT program will cost us approximately $35 million. It speaks volumes of how tiny the amount you've allocated for lifting people up and what little priority it conveys to residents. It essentially says, let those who are struggling the hardest fight over peanuts. I'm here to remind you that we are increasingly living in a city with a growing problem of income inequality, rapid climate change, and precarious work. It is becoming more and more difficult to put food on the table and a roof over our families' heads. And this is precisely the time when we should not shy away from leadership, but build rather than kick the can down the road in the hopes of a different solution may arise. We need bold political leadership that will not make empty promises and just another strategy, but will lead with conviction and a true commitment towards a greater city for everyone. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for your deputation. Councillor Carroll.
Yeah, thanks. Quick question about the IMIT grants. I'm not sure, Councillor Layton's just come back. He may or may not remember if we We moved last year that we wanted to get an annual update on foregone revenue from IMIT grants and greater detail when we were allowing one. The information that you have, was that easy to obtain? Did you have to FOI and struggle to get to that $400 million amount? Or is that from our previous briefing notes?
It's from your previous briefing notes, but also there was a divisional plan that was being done in the economic division, economic development and cultural division, and through that we engaged with staff to find out what the process was by which these grants were approved. Typically the grants are approved mainly by staff and they're not brought to council for approval. So it was a little bit difficult to get in the beginning, but we stayed steadfast to that and we got the information.
You understand that you know, having economic development strategies are good for any city, but when we changed the name from tax equivalent incremental grants to IMIT, I think people kind of lost track of the fact that we were allowing staff to simply forego taxation. To the degree that we might be heading down the same road that Cleveland did many years ago, where they found they'd cut themselves off from most of the core city business taxation for a good 25 years by just continuing to allow these grants until they had put too much of the square footage of the downtown core under an incremental grant.
Well, I mean, that was our original. We totally agree that having that incentivizing economic growth and business and jobs is an excellent thing for Toronto. But originally, when the program was created, there was a number of different issues around the film industry, about declining manufacturing, and we wanted to ensure as a city that, you know, those industries that are struggling have a little bit of an incentive from the city to be able to defer their taxes a little bit longer in order for them to be able to have a little bit of a gap moving forward.
A little bit.
A little bit.
Yeah.
But now, if you look at, you know, much of what is under review and under consideration has been approved, much of it is just downtown core office buildings where they're adding new floors, they're renovating, and this is prime real estate.
Right.
It's not like it's struggling industry that we're responding to. These are incredibly affluent companies that are making a ton of money, and we're essentially just subsidizing their profits.
Thank you. Thank you so much for bringing that to
Thank you for your
the fore.
Next is Judy Velland.
Yes, I'm Judy Velland, and I'm a resident of Ward 21. When I heard that no money had been included in the 2018 budget for Transform TO, my heart sank. Council has approved an ambitious, forward-thinking plan to address climate change, and not one penny has been allocated to make it happen. When I retired 10 years ago, I did so with the desire to devote my time and energy to environmental work. At that time, you had to search hard in the newspaper for one article about climate change. In just the 10 short years since then, things have changed dramatically. We have seen millions of people around the world impacted by climate change, which is happening far faster than anyone predicted. Lives, homes, and livelihoods have been lost. People in our city have experienced floods and an ice storm in 2013 and flooding on the island just this past summer. The cost of these weather events is in the billions. If I had chest pains and needed an ambulance, I wouldn't be keen on waiting while the city debated funding for our emergency services. Climate change is also an emergency. It is up to every single one of us to respond to this emergency. But as elected officials, you have more power and therefore a greater responsibility to act with the urgency required. If ever there was a need for strong leadership It is now. So please be the strong leaders that we need. Time is short and the stakes are high. So I call on you to fully fund Transform TO. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Next is Karen Buck.
I just have to shuffle the chairs a bit. Good afternoon, Chair and committee members. I'm here today to address the $2.5 million in the 2018 budget, which has been requested to fund Transform Toronto's short-term initiatives and staffing, and to address Council's prior approval of the goals and targets that address climate change through the city's emissions CO2 reductions. Climate change is the defining issue of our time. Ahead of the storm is an indicator of what could be in our future in Toronto in terms of extreme climate. Even without such extremes, Toronto and its residents have experienced, in particular, flooding brought on by intense rainfall. This is August 2005. The flooding has been widespread. The flooding has been widespread and has affected both the city and residents in at least 43 out of 46 wards, 44 wards, and there's been EAs carried out in those. And everybody's mentioned the flooding on the island. Here's a picture of it. And there's more to come. The costs, in addition to the deleterious effects to both residents and the city, have been large and widespread. But we are fortunate in Toronto to have a council that has supported strongly climate change programs and increased dedicated staff. We now have working on climate change issues the Toronto Atmospheric Fund, the Environment and Energy Division, and the Chief Resilience Officer to implement, oversee, and coordinate city programs among the city's divisions, agencies, corporations, and of course the shareholders, both residents and businesses. The programs include energy efficiency, district low-carbon energy products like district cooling, review of building codes, promotion of better transportation choices for Toronto employees, a new Toronto Green Standard, fleet fuel efficiency, electrification, use of biofuels, and new resources, incentives, and financing opportunities for property owners. These programs are all business cases which should be funded in the 2018 budget as brought forward through Transform Toronto as their short-term strategy. There is an alignment of the short-term strategy with the city's approval of the long-term climate change goals and targets for addressing climate change through CO2 emission reductions within the city. However, as you can see on this slide, when we look at the approved long-term goal and compare it with the current short and long-term proposed Transform Toronto's programs, there is a gap of 9 million tons that needs to be addressed to achieve the long-term goal of the council, and this is strongly supported and approved 80% reduction of greenhouse gas emissions within the city. In conclusion, this Toronto Council, should continue its strong support of its citizens and its climate change programs by supporting at the least the $2.5 million required for Transform Toronto's short-term program. The city's financial support of its climate change programs is critical to its own success, but is critical also to global success of goals to reduce global overall greenhouse gas emissions accumulation. As the UN Secretary General Ban Ki-moon said on September 2014, when there is no planet B, there is no plan B. And Charles Darwin also can be credited with, it is not the strongest or the most intelligent who will survive, but those who are most responsive to change. And I add, those who fund the programs that create that change. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Carroll.
Thanks, Karen. You raised the end game of Transform TO. We've heard a lot here and last night in North York and in Scarborough, but please spend this $2.5 million. But you raised the year target, which I think is important, and you know the plan very, very well. If we don't spend the $2.5 million this year to hire the few, Miguel, we're.
Councillor, continue, please.
Thanks. Yeah. So the $2.5 million this year, it seems like a small amount, but it hires a few people. If we don't hire those people, that 2050 starts to fall apart, because if we don't hire them in year 2, then year 3 and 4 can't happen, and if year 3 and 4 don't happen, and so on and so on. Isn't that the way the plan is constructed in your understanding?
It is. It's a building plan. And
Right.
it's every success then builds on every other success.
Yes,
and
that's the way.
measurements and models so that they can correct and move the plan forward so that in the end, hopefully we can meet that 80% reduction which council has approved.
Yes.
And I suppose the big thing is too that besides that short-term plan and Transform TO, there are also other funding programs actually happening in other divisions of the city, which is complementing that. So we need to keep the whole plan together with all the divisions, all the corporations, all the agencies of the city.
Yes, yes. Okay, thank you. That's a much better way of putting it. I couldn't put my finger on.
And with the proper staffing to make sure that it can happen. Yes. Yeah, for sure.
Thank you. Colleagues, I've had a request by Patricia Reed. She's number 59, had to leave before 3 o'clock, so I'm just wondering if we could accommodate that. Is Patricia here? Patricia Reed?
I thank you for accommodating me because I couldn't stay after 3. My name is Patricia Reed. I live in Ward 28, and it's a very poverty-stricken area where I live. I live at 155 Sherburne, which is a really bad area. I see the homeless all the time. They need to be off the street and counseled and helped with their addictions. Where I live is Toronto Community Housing. My heat has been about 15 to 18 Celsius. And all that cold weather, I had to go out to restaurants to warm up. But we really need affordable housing. We need to get those people off the street. I see ambulance after ambulance coming to pick them up. It's costly. Maybe just as costly as putting them in one room or something. Anyway, I worry about the Presto card because I've been able to buy a few tokens or tickets to go on the TDC, but after the Presto card comes, I have no way of getting on, and I'll probably have to walk or hitchhike. I've been a volunteer for all my life. I'm going to be 77 this year in July, and I've volunteered with Live Green for probably 13, 14 years because I believe in that. Before that, it was Pollution Probe and other things. And I also volunteered at the Stop Garden at Davenport and Lansdowne. And we, not last year, but the year before, we grew almost a ton of food, 5 pounds less of a ton of food. And half of that went to the food banks because I'm a believer that people should have fresh food. Part of the garden we split amongst the workers, but half of it went to the food bank. So I think myself, when I look out, it seems to me that the more people who are on the street, and they all have addictions or something else, I'm not saying they're not having addictions, and we keep them there, it's going to cost us. I see the ambulances coming 3-4 times a day sometimes, and that's costly. It might be cheaper just to put them in a room and get out there and start helping them with their issues. You know, it just bothers me. I see this one guy, he's in a wheelchair, and he's sleeping out in the cold when they had a cold alert. And I went and called 311 to see if he could get help to move, but he doesn't like the shelters. Shelters are not the answer. They eat your soul, and it's not, you lose your things, people steal, they have fist fights. I went up to the one at Shooter in Dundas. It's a big church. Lordy, I wouldn't like to be there. They were charging people 25 cents for a little cup of coffee like this, styrofoam cup. And there was just fist fights and all sorts of things. So we can't do that, the shelters. We got to stop and put them in a place at least, even if they just have a room that they can lock, and then get the counseling, because there's a lot of mental illness there. And that's all I wanted to say. But I also wanted to mention my wonderful heat that I have from Toronto Community Housing. And I can't live like that either. Anyway, thank you for hearing me. I really appreciate the time. And this time I decided I'm not going with figures. Everybody has the figures. I want to tell you how I'm living as a senior. Before I moved down here, I couldn't go on the TDC very much, and I had really great depression because I couldn't get to my friends. Really terrible, terrible thoughts. But now I'm down where I can walk most places, except for my doctor at Sunnybrook. I don't know how I'm going to get there, but I feel cut out of the TDC. With the Presto card, I just feel like, too bad, old woman. You know, just eat it up. Anyway, thank you so very much.
Thank you, and appreciate that. Next is Jane Mercer.
Good afternoon, and thank you very much for giving me this opportunity. My name is Jane Mercer, excuse me, and I'm speaking on behalf of the Toronto Coalition for Better Childcare. We represent over 20,000 families in our member centres and speak for thousands more who desperately need access to affordable, high-quality childcare. Councillors, you have told Torontonians again and again over the last term that you understand childcare is vital to our city. You have told us you understand young families will not be able to live and work in this city without it. That you understand that childcare supports not only the workforce of today, but the workforce of tomorrow as well. Your commitment has never been as strong as when this summer, Toronto's 10-year childcare growth strategy called for significant investments from all 3 levels of government, and it was adopted by you, Council, virtually unanimously. We were so excited and thankful for the leadership that you had showed at such a critical time, and we believe it was instrumental in bringing both the province and the federal governments to the table. So thank you for last summer and your leadership. The province and the federal governments have come to the table. They have come with $56 million for childcare in Toronto over 2017-18. And with the city's commitment to match these dollars by 20%, parents knew that we would finally be growing more childcare spaces, more childcare subsidies, and lowering parent fees. So what happened? In this budget, there is no new investment from the City of Toronto. None of what Council committed to. Just a couple of months ago, you recommitted to it in October. Now, it's just not there. Poof. We don't know exactly how this budget process works. We don't fully understand what goes into it and at what stage, and what doesn't get into it, and who makes those decisions. It appears as though most of the provincial dollars have been added in, but not all of them. It appears as though funding for increase in city staff has been added in. So why was the promised investment of city dollars to increase subsidies and lower parent fees not added in? In fact, to our horror, not only is there not an investment of city dollars, $1 million has been cut from the net budget. We're saving money for the city on childcare. We're using the provincial dollars as cover for cuts. Again, I will concede we do not exactly follow how this budget made it to this table, but I can tell you, parents understand that it is their councillors that make the final decision. And so we urge you to keep your promises to parents to invest in childcare. We urge you, make sure that every federal, provincial and city childcare dollar that has been committed makes its way into this budget and all the way through to delivering service on the front line. That means put it directly into childcare subsidies for low and middle income families, general operating funding to reduce parent fees and improve salaries, and pay childcare programs their true and actual costs. You do it for your own centres, do it for the 96% of the centres out there that are delivering this care for you. Because that gap between actual costs and the per diems paid by the city is one very big reason why parent fees keep going up. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Layton.
Thank you very much. And risking of having a conflict of interest, I'm still going to ask the question. The $1 million reduction, so the provincial money, how much of that is included in the budget? As far as you can tell.
I have to be honest, I would say the majority, but not all of it. I find this budget, and I've been doing this now for a lot of years, it's getting more and more complicated to follow the dollars around.
So what is that? What was that amount? I just can't recall what the announcement was a couple of months ago.
From the province?
From the province.
From the province,
To the tune of
it
about
combined. 20? The province's money was definitely like 37 million. I'm looking over to your staff. I think they could give you a much more accurate answer.
Let's call it in the $30 million range, and there's been a reduction of $1 million from the proposed budget.
It looks to me as though there is actually a reduction in your net city dollars spent on childcare.
So we've added 30.
And taken back 1.
And
given, patted everybody on the back for the fact that you've grown the system. Our point is, we have grown the system. We definitely have. We had 2,800 new subsidies added this year, I believe. We've got another more coming on. That's great, but we are so far behind. And when we've only got enough children that 20% can get into childcare, even if it's raised by 10%, we've still only got enough that 22 out of 100 children can get into childcare. So the very fact that we would bring those provincial dollars in, dollars that we fought like so hard for, the city and the community.
And not increase the...
And not only not increase the city's portion, as you promised you would, and I do believe I've heard, although I haven't got the quote in front of me, but I believe I've heard Councillor Crawford and the mayor say that you do want to put those dollars in. So that's great. So I'm here to say we are desperate to see those dollars in the budget. The commitment from the city. The commitment was the city will match by 20%. Well, if you're going to match by 20%, I think you're up for about 10 million. If you choose to interpret that the province put more in than we expected in the first year or two, so the city can still keep it on track by putting in a bit less, then okay, you might be able to argue that. But I don't know how you justify, we took $1 million out because we saw so much money coming through.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you for your deputation. Next is Karathika Mohana Chandran.
Is this on? No, it isn't.
It is on, yes, you'll have 5 minutes.
So good afternoon. Thank you, councillors of the Budget Committee, for providing me with the opportunity to speak to you today. My name is Carr, and I am a York University student and a member of Commitment to Community, otherwise referred to as C2C. C2C is a citywide coalition that works to support actions that reduce poverty and make Toronto a more equitable city to live in. Over the last 8 to 9 months, C2C has spoken with hundreds of residents across Toronto about their concerns about the city and the vision for their future. The results of these dialogues are included in a report entitled Voices of Toronto Speak Up, which was presented to the Executive Committee at the end of November last year. Residents raised concerns about the lack of decent employment, difficulty to secure affordable and supportive housing, the need for better transit service, the lack of affordable childcare, the need for more student nutrition programs, and the expansion of recreation programs. We know that this is not the case today. Shelter use by families has increased 50% since last year. Food bank use in Toronto is up 9%. Toronto has the highest rate of child poverty among large Canadian cities. And Indigenous people, people of color, newcomers, and women-led families experience even more higher rates of poverty. 100,000 families are on the wait list for subsidized housing. This is up 10% since 2013. And 62,000 residents are on wait lists for almost 200,000 recreation program spaces. This has gone up 75% over the last 3 years. One of the most commonly raised concerns among the residents that we spoke with in our engagement was a lack of affordable housing. Continuing to only provide Toronto with band-aid solutions, such as expanding shelter spaces, but not increasing affordable and supportive housing units, does not solve the crisis of homelessness in Toronto. Poverty costs us all. According to a 2017 report, poverty in Toronto alone costs governments and citizens $4 to $5 billion a year in healthcare and justice system costs, as well as lost tax revenue. In May, the city staff determined that it would cost $66 million to fully implement 11 key city strategies, including the Poverty Reduction Plan in 2018. But in the city's preliminary budget, $41 million in promised actions on jobs, housing, transit, and climate change remain unfunded. We asked that the Budget Committee fully fund the 2018 work plan for the poverty reduction strategy and fully fund the $41 million in enhanced initiatives in the 2018 budget that are deemed to have positive impacts in reducing inequities. This will help 1,400 more families access affordable housing, create 1,000 more childcare spaces, half with subsidies, make TTC fares more affordable for 36,000 low-income adults, help 13,000 more children across across the city to access school food programs, help 3,500 more children access free swim classes, assist 2,300 more children access subsidized and after-school programs, and help 3,000 more seniors access free dental care. We also urge the city to set clear longer-term targets for reducing poverty and inequality in Toronto and for reducing wait lists for services such as affordable housing. Finally, we urge you to complete the long overdue long-term fiscal plan to put the city on solid financial footings so that together we can build a city of opportunity for all. We believe a portion of the revenues from the plan should be allocated to ensure the continued implementation of the city's poverty reduction strategy. Thank you for your time and for your efforts in making Toronto a better city to live in for all.
Thank you very much.
Thanks.
Thank you. Next is Don. Oh,
Quick
Councillor
question.
Carroll had a quick question.
Who all do you represent?
Commitment to Community. It's a citywide coalition across Toronto.
So it's groups forming a coalition?
Yes, it's different. It's made up of different nonprofit groups, residents, faith communities, different agencies across Toronto that are working towards the poverty reduction goals, essentially, that the city has set out.
And you're asking us not to choose, to really look at the whole 41 million.
Yes.
And in that 41 million, you realize that the whole 41 million doesn't even add up to just this year's assessment growth?
Yes.
You're going to have $55 million more
Yeah.
in property tax this year.
I'm
From new residents, not increases in property tax, just new residents coming on stream.
Yes, I am aware, and I know it's a very ambitious ask. However, when this was promised to all Toronto residents unanimously across council, I think the residents of Toronto deserve this. I think we owe it to the residents of Toronto, and ultimately, when we look at the savings that would be happening as a result of this, you would be saving a lot more money.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Next is Don Wheats. Whites, I apologize, Mr. Whites. I do my best to get those names correct, and yeah, anyway, any one of those seats.
Thank you very, very much. Well, you're close. It's Don Whites, and I wear a number of hats. Besides being an 87-year-old grumpy old man, I'm a longtime social justice activist, a member of OCAP, and I've been fighting for the rights of psychiatric survivors who are generally dumped on the cold Toronto streets, forced to fare for their own because there are not enough supportive housing alternatives in Toronto. I will address myself first. Oh, I also am a member of CC Riders organization. I see there are two more speakers here from CC Riders, and I fully support their agenda, which is making a TTC fare pass affordable for virtually everyone in Toronto. This is not the case now. There are many people who are receiving government assistance who should be getting virtually a free pass, but are not, are forced to pay at least $3 every time they use the TTC. Since 2016, Mayor Tory was talking about a fair pass. There's been no action. Why not? I'm not going to be silent about Mayor Tory's silence and betrayal for people who are most in need. That is, people who are receiving government assistance, including those on ODSP and OW, okay, who are labeled poor, who are making less than $23,000 a year. They deserve a free TTC pass, or at least not having to pay more than $1 each time they use the TTC, and should be given a pass for at least for $50 per month. I am advocating all seniors and people with disabilities, especially those who are on government assistance, should get a free Metro Pass. And that is the humane thing to do. But apparently this city council is too damn cheap and mean-spirited to not even consider a free pass for some of the most vulnerable citizens in Toronto. And yes, I'm damn mad about it, and I hope you can tell in my tone. It is gouging vulnerable people to ask them to fork over about $3 every time they use the TTC. And by the way, the TTC is not totally accessible because there are a lack of elevators in roughly half of the subway stations. And I checked this out with the former head of the TTC, and he could confirm that this would be corrected. Now, this is a 2 or 3 phase process of allowing everybody in Toronto to get an affordable pass. My second priority, which I've been very active in for the last 25 years, is affordable housing, which a number of speakers have eloquently and forcefully advocated. This is a shame. This is not a local emergency. This is a national emergency where all levels of government are to blame for the lack of housing. Yesterday, I attended the homeless memorial in front of the Church of the Holy Trinity, where we go every second Tuesday to recognize and give tribute to the homeless people who've died on our streets. And as of this date, roughly 900 people, 900 reported deaths of homeless people have occurred in the last 15 to 20 years.
We'll have to wrap up.
Yes. I'm about to wrap up if you're... are you interrupting me?
Oh, no, you have 5 minutes to speak.
Yeah,
so
well,
just
there
ask
are
you
other
to-
speakers who have talked a hell of a lot longer, I can tell you that.
Actually, not.
Now, but so please be just and allow me at least a minute, if you don't mind. There is an immediate need, not just shelters. Shelters are no answer, but since there's a lack of strong city support for affordable housing, that's why we have to open more shelters. And I noticed that the Fort York was shot down by Mayor Tory. Moss Park has only 100 beds. We need another shelter to reach at least 1,000 more beds in the shelter system. So accessibility, financial accessibility to the TTC and affordable housing are the two big social justice issues that this city and others, but I'm talking Toronto, have miserably failed the citizens of Toronto and Canada, and there's no excuse for it. You have the money and spend it. Would you mind telling me, are you going to put a dollar sign on saving a life by building a decent affordable house?
Thank you, Mr. White.
So that's what I've got to say, and I am speaking not only for myself, but I'm sure for a lot of seniors and people with disabilities, and I share their serious issues.
thank you very-
And I want
sir,
you
thank
to
you very
be
much.
aware and to do the just thing and to address their needs through your budget.
Thank you, Mr. Weitz.
Thank you.
Next is,
Wait a minute, is there any question?
I think you were pretty succinct in your message to us.
Thank you for allowing me to speak,
Thank
because
you.
I will not be silent. Thank you.
Next is Emily Daigle. Emily? No, they canceled. I think we need to get the mic.
So I don't bowl it over.
I think the mic is on, okay.
Got it. So I want to say thank you, and I want to say hello, a very special hello to the counselors, to my fellow residents, and to those on YouTube, watching on YouTube, who cannot be here today. Hi, Mom. I'm wearing a very special T-shirt today. It's from Seattle. It's from Seattle. It's Seattle Seahawks. My sister-in-law lives in Seattle. Seattle has become a city for the rich only to live. It is full of tech industry and rich people, but the poor have been pushed out. They've been given one-way bus tickets. Many cities in California, Seattle, Washington, and many cities in the USA give people a one-way bus ticket. But that bus ticket does one other thing to you. Yes, you can go home. Yes, you have to have people to accept you. But it doesn't mean that you have a place to live. And the problem, when you get that bus ticket, you can never go back. You're banned for life from using the homeless services. Let's not become like those cities. Yes, we have the problem of other municipalities sending their problems to us here in Toronto. It happens already, it happens all the time. I'm one of those cases. I was homeless, my husband was homeless. Because we have disabilities, I couldn't stay in my hometown of Hamilton. I wish I could have, because then I wouldn't be coming here and terrorizing you guys all the time and lighting fires under your feet and keeping your feet to the fire. But because I didn't have children, I couldn't be in a homeless shelter in my hometown. Here in Toronto, I was homeless, person with a disability. My husband with a disability, both of us legally blind. Staff are not trained to deal with people like us. Staff are not trained to deal with people with disabilities. There is no money in the budget to train these people. Large print, braille, hearing impaired, anyone speak ASL. The housing workers in the homeless shelter system don't know a darn thing about helping us find proper, accessible, wheelchair-accessible housing. People with disabilities have the longest waiting list for housing in the city of Toronto. An average waiting list for any proper wheelchair-accessible housing, and that's a modified unit done properly, which in Toronto isn't guaranteed because some of those units they say are wheelchair accessible. Yeah, no, they're not. They're not done to code. They're not done to AODA. Most of those units are anywhere between 15 and 40 years of waiting. Let me say that again. 15 to 40 years. That's a lifetime for a lot of people with disabilities, especially people with severe disabilities. Many of those units are in old TCHC buildings that are crumbling and falling apart. One of my closest friends, when I lived in 5005 Dundas so long ago, her Hoyer lift track that was installed on the ceiling was not properly installed. She fell from that lift 7 times. She couldn't get adequate PSW care. This is 10 years ago now. And my close friend lost her life because she fell off the Hoyer lift and landed on the back of her head and the back of her back. She was severely disabled. Now you imagine women with disabilities. I love how people like to say that women and people with children and this and that, and they have the hardest time and low income, and they have the hardest time getting jobs. I want to laugh, because not one of those people today have brought up the issue of people with disabilities that no one will hire, not even the TTC, because I've tried for 9 years. People don't hire people like me. I'm in a wheelchair, I'm legally blind, I'm hearing impaired. We are the worst in society when it comes to being able to get a job, being able to get a place to live. Homeless shelters are not built to accept us. The only family shelter in the city of Toronto, the Family Res, I had to take you guys to the city ombudsman because our lives were put in danger numerous times. There's one room. It's not even properly done. There's a step like this to get in and out of the main door. A power wheelchair, a basic power wheelchair, can't do that step. So tell me again, how many of these respite centers have people there to help people with severe disabilities? How many of the washrooms in these respite centers are properly wheelchair accessible? Is it going to take somebody with a disability dying in one of these places and suing you? Oh yeah, that's right, people like me can't sue. We don't have the money. How many more people are going to have to die in this city? How many more people and women with disabilities are going to have to live in abusive situations? How many more women with disabilities and families with disabilities are going to have to live in extremely substandard accommodations? Yeah, affordable housing is great, but the problem is, and this is the problem I've got, I fought to get into 75 Cooperage, Pan Am Athletes Village, but there's a problem. I lose my subsidy in 2024. Not only that, my maximum rent on ODSP is $753 for 2 people. My rent right now is $651. It goes up every single year.
You'll have to wrap up, Emily.
Yes, sir. I'm going to ask you a question. In 2024, when people in my building with disabilities living in very tiny apartments with substandard building because they knew it's for affordable housing, when it's extremely cold, there's so much cold coming in my windows that I have to put curtains and blankets over my windows. How many more people with disabilities need to die until people start making things properly wheelchair accessible? Thank you very much.
Thank you, Emily.
Any questions?
No, I think you...
No, people are afraid.
Not at all. I just thank you for you're very succinct.
Variety Village for life, that's all I'm going to say.
Next is Cheryl Tucker. Cheryl Tucker.
I got it. Sorry. Well, thank you.
Next is Halnya Zaluki.
Hi, I'm just going to keep this short and sweet. I got to go to a meeting, and I'm sure everyone else here is somewhere else they'd rather be. Oh, no. No? I'm sorry. Is that... I'm happy to be here. So appreciate you taking the time. I'm actually just kind of curious, and maybe this is just process. I don't understand why we only have 2 city councilors sitting here. 3, sorry. So, you know, it's
just to answer that, so that there's the budget committee, there's 7 members. They have split up so we can reach other areas of the city. So we're actually out in other parts of the city.
Okay.
Yeah, I was just going to say, Mr. Chair, because to tell them not only are there are the rest of the budget committees in East York, but there are also, like Councillor Layton, there are some councillors who are not even members who are also at East York. So, and somebody just tweeted on here, I don't know, I think it was Councillor Fletcher, somebody tweeted, some of the councillors are actually watching this on TV.
Okay, great.
You're on the
Well, hello, councillors that
Somebody
are
just
watching
tweeted that
us
to
on
someone.
TV.
Yeah.
I just want to say really quickly, and I think in support of really everyone that's here, I mean, there's so many really super important issues that are being brought to the fore and services that we really need. I'm one of those people that are particularly focused on Transform TO. I think it's absolutely critical. It's like building a house, and all of these services are part of that house on a volcano. So we need to address that volcano. We need to address the fact that we are in a very critical moment in time, and you guys are the elected leaders. You were the people that we chose to be our voices and to make good decisions and sometimes hard decisions And as someone, I think, young-ish, I still have a little bit of a future that I would like to see, to have hope for. I think about having kids, and I wonder whether I will because I'm so scared of what the future holds. And I'd rather not wake up every day in fear. I'd like to know that my city is taking the responsible actions that they need to take. You guys made a great first step in introducing Transform TO and coming up with a really amazing plan. So let's just take the next one and let's fund it fully. Thank you very much.
Thank you. There's been just one more request for somebody who has some time delays or issues, and if it's okay, we'll have Joanna Chambers from Food Chair come up and do her deputation.
I don't know if that will be corrected, but I'm actually not from Food Chair. But we've given that information to the clerk.
Okay, we'll fix that.
Okay, thank you. Good afternoon. My name is Joanna Chambers, and I am the curriculum leader at Subway Academy 2. We're a small public high school just around the corner at Beverly and Baldwin. We're a proud alternative school, unlike any other in the Toronto District School Board. We provide youth ages 16 to 21 with an independent and flexible learning environment needed by many who are working full-time, parenting a child, struggling with mental or physical health issues. We're a special and important place for about 100 people, young people in our city. The student nutrition funding that you provide us with and the food that we were able to serve as a result helps to form the foundation upon which we do our work at Subway Academy 2. Our nutrition program is the figurative and literal carrot that brings students into our building and keeps them there. For some, the only reason they come to school is because they know that there will be food. And by their own admission, it will likely be the only time that they eat that day. When we think about hunger, I don't know that many of us imagine a youth. And while they may inhabit adult-looking bodies, they are still, in so many ways, children in need of care. I assure you that I see hunger in the young people that I serve every day, and to the student who is a young parent or is living in a shelter or who supports themselves in an effort to alleviate pressure on their own caregivers, the fresh, healthy, and warm meals that we have on offer every day matter so much. Our nutrition program is also a critical component in how we build community with each other. Food is at the center of Subway 2. The area where we serve our food is literally in the middle of our small school, and like at any good party, it's the place where people meet and connect. Our nutrition funds are spent locally in Kensington Market, and we recruit student volunteers to assist in the preparation and cleaning up of meals. And lastly, our nutrition program is one of the fundamental ways that we show students that we care. Our small staff of 6 work hard and take pride in preparing and serving food. And I am grateful for another tool to communicate to my students in a tangible way that they matter. Alternative schools are a haven for young people who have not found their place anywhere else. And our very design is intended to send the message that they belong and that we care. So making sure that students are fed, acknowledging that unless that need is met, we can't move forward is critical to the work that we do. So the staff and students at Subway 2, thank you for this continued source of funds. They are very much needed and appreciated, and thank you for your time.
Thank you. Next is Joyce Hall. If we can turn it on, yes. Oh, hold on a sec. Let our tech guy turn it on for you.
And our 2 songs that we have prepared are right on target for what many people have been saying. Our 2 topics are Transform TO and homelessness. So we are just going to add to the whatever people have said, and you're welcome to get up and dance and sing. And you probably need it at this point after all this sitting. Okay. 1, 2, 3, 4. We're just a gaggle of grannies, and we're getting off of our fannies. We sing because we care, so politicians beware. We're watching you. We're just a gaggle of grannies urging you up off your fannies. We're here to demand a climate action stand. Fund transform TO. Changing global weather. We're not on track to forestall. It can't warm over 2 degrees, or the future isn't happy at all. Now we've got a plan, so don't fudge it. Make sure it's there in your budget. A city that's smart, doing its part. Fund transform TO. And our second song is a good old Canadian standard with somewhat different words. How many nights? Okay, 1, 2, 3, 4. How many nights must a child go to bed without being properly fed? In this rich province, how many must die before politicians see red? The answer, of course, is political will. There's plenty of food for us all. How many families are waiting for homes? Their children with no place to play. How can they live in cramped, crowded rooms? No money to live day by day. The answer must be affordable homes for families in need right away. Amen. Thank you for the
Thank you.
opportunity to speak and sing.
Thank you very much. I don't think our budget deputations would be complete without the raging grannies every year.
Great job.
Next, Miguel Villa Velarde. Welcome, Miguel. Thank you.
After that show of, I don't have a song, sorry, I wish I have a song to improve my deputation today, but I'm here with my hat. I'm wearing my cat watch hat today and my thinking hat to bring to attention one thing. For all the people who work to improve our climate change and poverty Toronto, you know that the Toronto Police Services is one of the big money machines in the city of Toronto. It's about $1 billion, and I'm sad that in this amount, in this number reported for our meeting, they're not talking about the projection collective agreement, the police union and the city, and the Police Services Officers Association. So these are two elements that is going to change that number. Apparently, they're looking at around $50 million increase this year when they sign their union contract. So I know that in the city of Toronto, we have a situation where most councillors don't have no problem when the police come here and ask for money. Every time it happens, every time they want money, they're giving any kind of money. They want cars, they want toys, anything is being given to them. But we're asking money for our Toronto prosperity, zero. We're asking for an Aboriginal Affairs office to be run here in City Hall. It requires $500,000, but it's not in the budget. As an Aboriginal, I don't represent all Aboriginals in this city, but as an Aboriginal from Peru, I would really like to see an Aboriginal Affairs where we can be consulted and how we make policies for the city of Toronto that affects all of us, especially people of indigenous descent and black people as well. There's no funding for the anti-black racism initiative. Those are important matters to me because it affects us greatly because we are being carded like no tomorrow. There's no end. And you saw the abuse of authority here, right here in this committee room. I'm trying to speak, and I've been almost thrown out of the City Hall today. And I want to make this an investigation. I know that Peter Wallace, the general manager, is watching me right now. Please, Peter, I wanted to investigate what happened today because it was a show of abuse. What else I had to say? The shelter crisis. We have an opioid crisis. We need to invest in our housing because these people, they come from all over the province. We have refugees coming to our shores in search of a safe haven, and unfortunately, the sponsorships only last for a year. Once the sponsorships are up, the people need to find jobs, but as it is, finding jobs is so scarce. So for families who come from different countries, it's difficult to adapt in this country, and the waiting lists are incredible for Toronto housing. I live in Toronto housing, and I know how grateful I am that the feds and the Ontario government have come up with a solution not to close any homes for this year and the coming year. Again, let's put the poverty reduction at the forefront because having the ongoing problem of poverty, we're not putting priority. Instead, we're giving priority to other areas that really don't have any much relevance, like IT, consultants. We spend a lot of money in consultants' fees. I think it's time to rein in those consultants because they're making a lot of money out of taxpayers. Again, thank you so much, and hopefully to see you at City Council next month, if I don't get thrown out again.
Thank you, Miguel. Next is Sarah Ali. Sarah Ali. Okay. Okay. Angela Thomas. Angela Thomas. Jennifer Ho. Jennifer Ho. Maria Torres. Welcome. You have 5 minutes.
Good afternoon to everyone. A little correction, I know from Food Share. Like I said before, my name is Maria Torres, and I'm representing Holy Family Catholic School. CD Ward number 14, where I am the morning meal coordinator or a student nutrition program. At the school, we serve 250 meals a day, 5 days a week, consisting of grains, dairy, and fruit or vegetables. A few examples of what we feed our students include whole wheat cereal with milk and fruits, whole wheat pancakes with fruit and chocolate milk, whole wheat quesadilla with vegetables or fruits. This program is not exclusive, and we accommodate to any allergy or special diets our students may have. Our program receives financial support from parents, city, province, and fundraising. This program has 10 volunteers, including both students and parents and community members. Our work is being complemented for both children and parents. As a coordinator, I feel so happy when the kids said that they like the snack that we provide them. Sometimes they ask, what are the recipes, or I can share with them so their parents can do the same at home. I'm introducing different foods that come in a lot of colors and varieties, that some cultures or some countries, they don't have that option. This snack or morning meal program are extremely beneficial for our students. It gives our students more potential to study, more nutritious options, and healthy habits. Our teachers believe that the program is great because it provides a variety of healthy foods. The children are excited about this program because it creates more sense of community, effort, and teamwork. They share and look after each other. If they are fed the nutrients that they need, they can focus more on their work and not on their empty stomachs. As coordinator, I have noticed that some children don't have breakfast and only eat junk food as a snack, lunch, and sometimes even as breakfast. As a community, sometimes we struggle financially, and I would like to thank you, the city and the province, for the support that we are receiving, because without this, the whole program cannot be possible. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much for your deputation. Next is it Dorothy Amigo? Welcome.
Thank you. Happy New Year, and thanks for having me here. My name is Dorothy Amigo from Etobicoke Ward 6. I'm a public policy issues advocate for the more vulnerable people, work which I do through people helping organizations, including Women's Habitat, Daily Bread, Humber Seniors, Out of the Cold program, and so on. That means we are daily interacting and meeting with people on the ground, and I'm therefore here to share with you some of the concerns that have been expressed by the people that we interact with daily on the ground, including concerns that include businesses and NGO community partnership investment programs, food security, diversity and inclusions, among others, which I'll share as time allows. Regarding the businesses and NGO community partnership investment programs, last year we were very excited after campaigning here, actually after deputing here, and poverty reduction strategy funding was put in place with aims to, among others, support programs which fill up the gaps, service gaps, as well as create jobs within the community. A couple of us started programs, businesses that were actually funded. And this year we got very shocked to see that the budget had excluded funding such as $226,000 for strengthening neighborhood strategies and these other programs. So we were shocked, and we were wondering whether the promises made last year are going to continue again, or what is happening, because we are really on track as well, especially with our businesses and NGO programs. It's coming up very well, and we hope they will continue to be funded so we can progress at a faster level. Regarding food security, we talked here about food security, and the councillor seems to have understood us very well last year, but we were shocked to find that the expansion of student nutrition funding of $2.1 million did not even show up in the preliminary budget, which concerns us a lot, because other programs like Daily Bread now operating by the bootstrap can only supplement so much to families. And, you know, children who are the future of our nation have to be the priority. And I mentioned last year that a nation is judged by how best it treats its most vulnerable people. So we are still hoping that expansion of student nutrition program will be given a priority. And regarding diversity and inclusion, especially of visual minorities, Aboriginal peoples, and the severely disabled, we were excited last year when there was consideration of promoting this through at least, I think, 4 funding programs. Four programs, the funding of which would have amounted to up to $450,000. And what we see in the budget now is only $122,300 for year 218, which is also a concern because diversity, inclusion, harmony in our society would really make for a more vibrant society. So we are hoping this amount will not be slashed down to that level. And of course, these concerns, in light of all the ongoing, keep us on our toes, wondering and concerned. Because if you consider community health care centers, for example, they are so important because look at the increasing rents and elimination of things like health and dental coverage programs, which are echoing the minimum income wage increase to $14. Some of the organizations just have to make these cuts in order to be able to meet the minimum wages. And things like denture coverages, Metro Toronto offers it once every 5 years. So we have a lot of people, especially seniors, they are walking around with no teeth, they can't eat, they're swallowing their food and having lots of stomach complications and other health issues, and they end up, with our community health centers. So community health centers are taking care of not only people like this, but our youth as well. We have, especially in the Etobicoke community, youth who have been waiting for recreation services to be on that services for ages, and they can't get home. But like LAM Community Health Centers and others are providing alternatives for these youth. They have where to go. They have public living rooms. They have...
We'll have to wrap up, George.
Yeah. So we are hoping that with all these deductions going on and, agreements and arrangements that we made last year not showing up anymore, we are just requesting City Hall councillors to please take us seriously and at least prioritize these issues because they affect us very seriously. And if we do that, we are going to be able to have less problems, especially in our society, less crime, less idleness, especially for the youth.
Thank you very much, Dorothy.
Thank you so much, and we're trusting you to follow through with our arrangement, our agreements of last year. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Next is Liz Rice.
This is working? Yeah. Okay, so I'm here today having lived in different parts of Toronto. I'm very proud Toronto resident. I love the fact that there's so much safety and security in this city. And what I attribute that to is the fact that we do try to take care of the disadvantaged, and that makes me feel safer because when people are less angry and less desperate, they're less likely to commit a crime, and when they suffer less from mental health issues. The thing that I am not happy about, and that I would never say I'm proud about, is our environmental record in Toronto. We are the biggest city in Canada, and we certainly don't act like it. Here is a map of what used to be normal weather is gone. This is from the Environmental Commissioner of Ontario. The most extreme color, this red, is right where we are at the Great Lakes. This is the reality. This is the trend everywhere. Reinsurance. The insurance people who insure the insurance people are most concerned about things like floods. So if we look at this 2016 report, flooding is $62 billion in US, and that is up from the 10-year average, which is in orange. Flooding and severe weather, I highlighted these things because these are the types of things that affect Toronto. Okay, so the trend is going up. Used to be that fires were the biggest concern in insurance, and for 10 years now it's been flooding. We've certainly seen that in Toronto. You have a Future of Toronto Weather report that was done in 2011 by all these excellent experts. You have the data. A couple more insurance people, Insurance Bureau of Canada, private insurers representing the private insurers, and Intact Insurance, very large insurance company. It's saying that the damage from severe weather stands at 400 million per year in Canada, and this is a 4-time increase in less than a decade. Okay. There's so much that can be done for this problem of flooding, and it's called mitigation. Interestingly enough, one of the main things to mitigate flooding would be to prevent this problem of having so much garbage and leaves in the sewer drains, and this other thing called stormwater charge, which was looked at by council in 2017. Let's take a look at the vote on that one. I've specifically highlighted members of this committee. In yellow are the councillors that voted against the surcharge. I thought perhaps it might be because some of the councillors have not been in power for a long time, but then I realized I'm not even going to bother looking it up because common sense has no age limit beyond the age of, hopefully, adulthood. Resilience report, 2014. Talking about prioritizing, yes, except things are very intertwined with other things, right? If you have housing, you'll have better health. If you have better health, your mental health is improved. If you have a job, your mental health is improved. So it's very hard to prioritize such things. You're saying you want to explore partnerships with insurance. Insurance is gladly to partner with you. Healthcare, you have public health under your purview. All these things have little pictures of people because what they need is staff and collaboration. These words, coordinate, assist, collaborate. Transform TO is a plan that is 2 years behind, and what we're talking about is such meager resources that it's quite crazy to believe this is happening in a world-class city. All of these things, reporting, identification, consulting, again, staff, we need the staff. And when they do the reports, you need to actually act upon them and not just shelve them. Here's some great examples. 2015 Environmental Progress Report. This is all off the city's website. Okay, these are a bunch of reports. I've highlighted the old ones, but what's the point if they're old? What's the point of redoing them if you're not going to take any action for them? 2007, this great moving forward from framework to action. Yes, there's a few things that have been done to varying degrees. A lot of common sense advice in the little quotes beside, like a teacher saying, well, I tell my students to turn off the lights, but why can't the city mandate the big corporations to turn off the lights?
I'll have to wrap up very quickly.
Good question. So a lot of this seems to be politricks and not politics. And that's very concerning. I know you have a shortage of revenue sources, but let's take a look at this statistic from the presentation that was made to Budget Committee on December 15th from your staff member, Mark Beckering. He explained that solar installations on city facilities are already generating $3.8 million a year in revenue. If you look across the globe, solar is the #1 thing that is making money and saving people money. Yet here I'm looking at an amount of $3.8 million.
You'll have to wrap up, please.
And Transform TO, we're asking for a measly $2.5 million. And you're already making 3.8 from solar.
Thank you. Thank you for your deputation. Next is Jason Chan. Welcome.
Hi, welcome. Thank you. Good afternoon, members of committee. I'm Jason Chan, the new first vice president of QP Local 79, at which, as you know, represents about 20,000 frontline workers delivering city services such as childcare, shelters and housing, recreation, public health, and employment social services, just to name a few. I just came off the campaign trail where I spoke to hundreds of members over many divisions. And after years of budget cuts, they feel stretched to the limit. I want to take a moment to point out to why they are feeling so stretched. And so we have a chart over here, and it's our tracking of staff vacancies in 3 key divisions where service levels are being debated in this budget. This chart shows the number of vacant positions from 2013 to 2016 based on the city's own reporting through variance reports. And just to note that the 2017's end-of-year report hasn't been released yet, which is why 2017 is not included. But as you can see, the 3 divisions we focused on here, Parks and Rec, Public Health, and Shelters, are chronically understaffed, and it's not because we can't find people to do the work, it's to save money. The table on the side lists all of the divisions who reported this fall in the city's third quarter variance report that they were meeting budget targets, at least partly through staff vacancies. And let's be clear, when you don't hire frontline staff, it's a service cut. And due to time constraints, I'm going to focus on the challenges faced in recreation due to budget pressures and what you can do this year to start turning it around. But similar stories exist across our city services where people are waiting longer and staff don't have the resources to do their jobs. Shockingly, last year's budget saw the deletion of 111 staff positions in recreation at a time when wait lists for recreation programs were already ballooning. During the 2017 budget process, staff provided a briefing note on the wait lists in recreation, showing that they have grown by 64% in the last 3 years to 189,467. And Scarborough suffers the greatest wait list of the 4 community council areas with 65,638, and children make up 86% of the wait list. And last fall, staff have reported that recreation program wait lists have grown by another 10% to 74% in the last 3 years to nearly 200,000 now. And if nothing is done, it will grow to 400,000 by 2025. Let's remember, based off of what the staff reports say, these are mostly children who can't get into summer school, summer camps, preschool programs, or swim classes. At the last Community Development and Recreation Committee meeting in November, staff said that they can add 20,000 new program spaces in 2018, but in order to do this, you need to provide the funding, and Parks, Forestry, and Recreation Division needs to hire the staff. Let me talk about who these staff are. For the most part, they are youth who grew up in Toronto recreation. Now they are skilled young workers thirsting to provide a new generation of kids with the same great programs. Now let's talk about the cost. 20,000 new program spaces cost $773,000 net. Add in the phase 3 of the Swim to Survive program City Council promised as part of the Recreation Service Plan, and it's another $156,000. Right now, both of these costs are on the infamous list of the service improvements that are not included in the preliminary budget. That's $929,000 to provide the 20,000 recreation program spaces and swim survival skills to waiting children and their families, while also providing young workers with jobs. Surely it's worth it. And the same case can be made in better investments in shelters, public health, equity programs, the poverty reduction strategy, the anti-Black racism program, and a host of other services being discussed here because they are essential to that goal that should govern your choice above all else. And that's creating a livable city for everyone.
Thank you. Councillor Carroll has a question.
Thanks. First of all, hello, Jason. I haven't met you yet, the new executive.
Yes, hi.
You chose to zero in the high vacancy rate, jobs that we budget for and then they just don't get filled is across the divisions, but you focused on Parks and Rec. And I found it kind of shocking because we used to be criticized as politicians, all they care about is Parks and Rec, all the money's going to Parks and Rec. And second in line was the library. And earlier, the library executive were here saying, you know, we're dying here, there's nothing but part-time and gaps. So somewhere along the line, something has flipped. The place where we used to pour all the money are the hardest hit divisions.
I totally agree with that point. I mean, it's pretty shocking.
Yeah. So in terms of looking at what is the best way, if we wanted to build back and be supporting those people, our management in the divisions and finance staff, are they sitting down at any point in the year and saying, okay, if we did want to propose, if we wanted the service levels that the community keeps coming and telling us they want, do they sit down with the employee groups and say, what would it take? And you understand we have to present a sustainable solution to this. Is there any kind of cooperative discussion going on at this point?
Yeah, not that I'm aware of. I mean,
I think that we're open to that discussion, and I think that the new executive is reaching out right now to ensure that they're available for those discussions, but that hasn't been the history.
Yeah.
So I asked some citizen deputants earlier who said we don't want to be consulted at the last minute like this. If part of the motions that get moved in the budget this year were to say that we can't go into another term of office, another set of 4 years, without starting with a massive pre-budget exercise. What are the councillors' priorities and commonalities of purpose between us at the beginning of the term as new councillors all walk in the door? And then to pull the residents together, kind of like we did the last time was 2005, listening to Toronto to say, what is it the community really wants? Instead of, hey, community, can we raise your taxes? Hey, community, what do you want us to fund? What's the city you want? Before we do the budget. Should that be, if we move that motion, would the employee group support that? They might have to be patient while we did that at the beginning of the term, but would they support that sort of exercise?
Yeah, that would be excellent. Yes, definitely.
Okay, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Next, thank you very much for your deputation. Next is Gerardo Garcia. Welcome.
Thank you. Hello, my name is Gerardo Garcia. I live in the Ward 44 at Scarborough East. I would like to thank the Budget Committee for giving me this opportunity to speak today. So I would like to talk about the Toronto Transformation Plan, Transform TO, and the need to assign the budget to make this plan real in a really short term. This is an important issue, and it's not about just reducing greenhouse gas emissions. This is about leading the whole Toronto region and the community to a real sustainable future. Like many of you, I perceive a number of problems and needs in my community. To explain some things, I will talk about just a little about myself. I'm a Mexican biologist who worked about 20 years in education. Now, here in Canada, I'm enrolled in an environmental technology program at a college. I also work part-time as a cleaner in a downtown condo. So in my conditions, I just can't avoid to get involved in this problem, or in these problems. First, as Mexican, I am pretty familiar with all the consequences that for the lack of government planning when any big city continues growing. So Mexico City has become a very, very huge bag or place with problems. And for me, it's some kind of sad to see and identify similar and incipient situations like I've seen in my country or in my previous city. like the increase in traffic, public transportation gaps and delays, pollution, and waste management issues. Second, as a biology and environmental technology student, my concern about climate change and all the effects on biodiversity of Rouge Valley, that is the place where I live, all the effects on Ontario biodiversity and the rest of the world encouraged me to get involved in the action plans, especially in that region east of Scarborough, where the wildlife and natural landscapes are still a very nice part of our daily life. Finally, in my work, I can clearly see the number of solid waste produced per apartment. With not a real diversion and proper management. And believe me, if you could see that, you will be concerned too. Then to address these problems, the Transport TO plan should become a fact, since it includes solutions in a context of economic and environmental positive impacts for everyone. The City Council fully approved in 2007 the first step in this plan against the climate change. However, even the most effective strategies are useless without the funding to make them reality. Toronto also will struggle a lot to meet the goals proposed for 2050 and cannot be done without a significant investment. So we are expecting from all councillors to join us to take action for the city short term and for the planet long run. I can see a number of benefits in Scarborough, my community, embedded to the same plan. Efficient energy buildings, making the life, for example, of all the people not only more healthy, comfortable, and eco-friendly, but a life more affordable. So just to conclude, I'm asking, like any other people has done before, that for this 218 budget, the City Council actively support and fully fund the Transport TO plan. I thank again for the committee the opportunity to speak today. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for your deputation. Next is Laurel Rothman.
Thank you. Thanks for the opportunity. So I come here to the committee to raise concerns and seek some clarification about budget items for childcare. I am with the Ontario Coalition for Better Childcare, but we all know that and recognize the important leadership the City of Toronto has taken, continues to take for decades, and how important it is to the overall childcare sector, families in the city and beyond. So I guess my overall recommendation, I'll say first, then I'll explain it a bit. I guess I want to urge the city to keep its commitment to invest the promised 20% municipal contribution. That was, I believe, a first commitment made by council last summer, so that we can access that significant provincial and federal money, which has not always been there, but is there now. So I guess that's why I'm puzzled by the current budget proposals. So as you know, in 2017, it was a good year for childcare so far. A new provincial framework was announced with money and action plan committed to building a childcare system with enough services for all families who want them. A goal that we've advocated for decades, and certainly the city's always been quite supportive. District service managers like the city play a key role. They're key partners in achieving this goal. As a funding partner, you not only contribute, you do administrative, financial support and transfer, and operate very high quality programs. As well, in 2017, we saw money from the federal government directly for child care services. We haven't seen that for quite a while. So within this context, City Council's approval of the 10-year growth strategy for childcare and the commitment to maintain the 20% contribution to increase accessibility and improve affordability was very timely and appropriate. However, while recent expenditures are definitely beginning to help, I don't know about you, but I run into colleagues on the street who say, my children, my grandchildren, my neighbors, they actually got a fee subsidy and a space so they can move on with their lives. But the city still serves less than 20% of the population and has over 12,000 eligible children waiting for subsidies. Now, the 2018 city childcare budget, as I understand it, and I'm not an expert, I have to admit, is, I believe, $551 million gross, but $80 million net of the senior levels of government's contribution. Now, the budget needs to better reflect expansion and improved affordability, but as of yet, it does not. I'm particularly concerned about the new services that are funded by senior levels of government but are not in the preliminary budget. Although I understand that there's $48 million gross with no net available. So these include 825 new fee subsidies. Those are for families across the city. Affordability operating grants to reduce all child care fees. Operating funding for the downloaded, the parent-child centers. The city now has a managerial, I think that's the right word, or financial role. Home childcare, increased staff for growth, special needs, expansion of city center spaces in 2 of the city's operated centers, for which we're very happy to see a commitment to publicly operated childcare. So I guess I just want to say, in the interest of families in Toronto and beyond, we want to see that you commit to your municipal 20% and matched funding so that the senior levels of funding that have been approved, as I understand it, will flow. And urge you, and we can expand subsidies, reduce fees, and increase spaces and services.
Thank you. Oh, Councillor.
Yes, thank you very much. Laurel, do you know what the reduction would be for parents if we were to apply the operating fee subsidy? Sorry.
I don't have those figures.
I'm just trying to conceptualize what that calculation would look like, not entirely for my own benefit, but for that of the other families that have their kids in childcare. Do you know if we could get that number? Do you know who or how we could?
You mean the money that's in the budget now that I'm talking about?
No,
or
the money that's not showing up. The potential announcement to reduce for all parents to reduce the cost. What that calculation was to any given family.
There wasn't such a number yet. No. They have agreed, they have an affordability study out there, which we're hoping to hear from in February. Okay. So we don't have a gross number for that. But I do know, and I was actually here in November, and Councillor at Community Development and Recreation and Councillor Mihevik said, are you talking to all the provincial political parties? And we said yes. So that's one reason I came back to say we need you to do your part as well. I would say, I know that, I don't know, but I would expect from what I heard city staff say, Children's Services, that they're trying to balance both using the money for subsidies and starting to bring those fees down. But it's going to take a lot of money to bring it down more than a few dollars a day at a time. It'll take more money. But we need to keep doing whatever is possible and approved to do. So I'm sorry, I don't have much more detail.
That's okay. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Carroll.
Yes, thank you so much, Laurel. You've been tracking childcare in Canada for a very long time.
Yeah.
To my memory, this is the first time. Lots of times in all sorts of things, in transportation and housing and in all sorts of things, occasionally the governments we keep asking kind of get ahead of us and give us what we've been asking for sooner than we expected. But this, I think, would be the first time we said, no, you're too soon, we're not using this, we're not putting our piece forward. I think this would be the first time we just said no and left all these 800 spaces and changes to fees below the line and didn't take them up on their offer.
I think you're right. I mean, I can't, in my memory, which kind of does go too far
I
back.
do know of many times in my memory where that happened, up to and including Transit City, where suddenly Dalton McGinty said, yes, I'm coming to the table 5 years early. And we had to dig into some reserves, but we did, rather than lose the chance to keep them as a partner. Yeah.
And I think it's doable. Obviously, you guys get into the nitty-gritty of what stays, what goes, and I guess I would urge you to say, put that expenditure back in so we can lever that provincial federal money.
And it wouldn't be, we're not talking about, if we were to dig into a reserve and say, our 10 million has to come forward, it's not as if that would be ignoring poverty reduction strategies. Some of the people waiting for spaces are people who would dig their way out of poverty if they had that space.
Absolutely. And I also, my understanding, and I don't claim to be the absolute expert, is that the items I listed don't have a municipal contribution because they have changed a few things and become more flexible. So I think there's room there to achieve progress without a lot of money.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you for your deputation. Next is Sean Mahar. Welcome, Sean.
Thank you very much. My name's Sean Maher. I'm the Executive Director of Social Planning Toronto. And I've sort of tossed aside my usual data-driven depth because I'm deeply concerned by some of the comments that have been made in the past week about the budget. Hearing councillors tell the people of Toronto that the things that aren't funded haven't been funded because they're just nice to have, that council needs to focus more on our real priorities, or that we don't have the money to fund it all, leaves me very concerned. First of all, because the people of Toronto are not asking council to fund some arbitrary array of endless asks. They're asking council to fund the things that council said it would do. They're asking council to fund the strategies and policies that council has already adopted. It is worrisome to hear decisions of councils called nice to have or called anything other than the real priorities of this city council. And it's even more worrisome when we look at what those policies and programs are. When I think about my kids having a roof over their heads, or the kids of my fellow Torontonians, I don't think our housing strategy is just nice to have. I think it's a real priority. When I think about Jeremiah Perry, who drowned this summer on a school trip, when I think about his family, I think that the Swim to Survive program and the other recreation access funding that is in the unfunded list in this budget is more than just nice to have. When I think about the people who die on our streets every winter, I think that our shelter system is more than just nice to have. I think it's a real priority. And in fairness, I had assumed that when council voted unanimously for a poverty reduction strategy, decided to pass a senior strategy, adopted a youth equity strategy, just weeks ago decided to create an Indigenous Affairs office, they did that because they actually thought those were real priorities and not just nice to have. And let's not leave out, when we talk about that unfunded list, the other list. We call it the unmentioned list. The things that didn't even make it onto the unfunded list of this budget. Staff last summer calculated that we were already $66 million behind on those policies and programs that council had adopted. Housing programs, seniors programs, youth programs, that's another $25 million worth of things council said it was going to do that didn't even make it onto the unfunded list. Those things, they're not just nice to have either. And when we look at those choices, let's look at what council decided its real priorities were. When earlier in this budget process, councillors asked that we look at the millions of dollars that we spend subsidizing polluters, paying millions more to clean up polluters' messes than we charge them for the program that delivers that service. Council refused to even get a report on the millions of dollars wasted subsidizing polluters. Is subsidizing polluters more of a real priority than serving seniors? In this budget, we are putting $60 million into capital from current, which means we're taking precious operating dollars and subsidizing our capital budget so that we don't hit an arbitrary borrowing ceiling that council simply made up, which sits at half of the borrowing ceiling imposed by the province. Is avoiding hitting an arbitrary, self-imposed, made-up target more of a real priority than keeping people from freezing to death on our streets? Council spent hundreds of millions of dollars putting the Gardiner Expressway on stilts from Jarvis to the river. Is that really a bigger priority than housing the homeless or making transit affordable or helping kids swim to survive or meeting our obligations to Aboriginal people? You get the idea. If, on the other hand, Council is saying that these are real priorities, that we have to do these things, that they were important enough to adopt and they're important enough to do, but there's just no way to find the funding, there just isn't any way, then why has Council deferred and delayed and dithered on the revenue tools that Council asked the province to give us, and they did, that Council asked KPMG to evaluate, and they told us had hundreds of millions of dollars of unrealized revenue in them? Why wouldn't we use those tools if the fiscal shortfall was such a stricture that we couldn't do the things that we said were real priorities? Or why wouldn't we, as unpopular as it might be, not turn to the city's homeowners and ask them to dig in to the tune of $2 a week? Since we already protect tenants from these tax impacts, we already protect low-income seniors, could we not ask the lowest taxed, highest appreciating homes in the province to chip in $2? Sadly, the reality is that Council is not funding these programs because Council is choosing not to. So I do hope if Council chooses not to fund them, they will turn to the people of Toronto and admit that none of those things were real priorities.
Thank you, Sean. I see no questions. Oh, wait a minute. Councillor Carroll.
I thought maybe I'll thank you for Councillor Layton then. He's too modest to thank you for raising the polluter pay funds that we keep refusing every year to collect to help cover some of these costs. Yes, we now call it Councillor Layton's annual The Salmon Fights for Survival motion. Each year it swims upstream.
And we do have a large array of subsidies that we still haven't properly reviewed. I still haven't seen the review that Council asked for last June of subsidies to developers. That several reports from the media have indicated don't yield anything like what we spend on them. We are spending money in ways that we could retarget at the most vulnerable, and we're spending them on some of the most affluent people in the city.
Yes, yes. Now, I hope you won't mind me putting you on the spot. It's many, many years ago when you and I were teenagers, but you worked.
It was a while back.
Yes, you worked for Councillor McConnell back in the day. Do you remember back in those days that councillors were constantly criticized? You're far too focused on Parks and Rec and those things. You know, you're putting all your focus and all your funds into things like Parks and Rec. We have to spend some money elsewhere. It now seems to be the hardest hit when it comes to staffing, and we're promising people that we can deliver the ARC programs with the help of Children's Services and Parks and Rec, and we can keep pace with all these changes that are coming with full-day kindergarten, and yet now we're hearing that we're really not doing it. Recreation, and we're even building recreation centers, but slowly we're just we're sort of losing our focus that those are important things in the community.
Yeah.
Does it feel very, very different to you than it did 15, 20 years ago? Because
I think there's a whole distressing package here, and we've spent most of the last year going to neighborhoods all across the city, in every corner of Toronto, talking to hundreds of Torontonians about what kind of city do we want to build, what kind of city do we want to have, and I have to credit Council, credit where credit is due. Council has adopted these policies and programs and priorities like the poverty reduction strategy and the youth equity strategy that really respond to the things that people in those neighborhoods are talking about, the things that help those communities succeed. But we haven't funded them. And when we have those conversations, people talk a lot about housing and shelters and things that they know we have a deep moral obligation to deliver, and they talk about those things in a way that reflects a real sense of responsibility. But they also talk about recreation. They talk about that one from the gut. Because practically, you can't find a neighborhood where people haven't been desperately trying to get their kids into recreation programs as part of learning and skill development and childcare that enables them to work And when you have 200,000 kids waiting for recreation programs, you know something is going wrong.
Yes.
And when we finally confront that and say, no, we're going to have to invest in addressing that backlog. We're going to have to find some strategy for reducing the waiting list, and we adopt that, and then 8 weeks later, we turn around and say, oh, but we're not going to fund it. We're going to adopt a policy to fix the problem, but we're not going to fund the policy to fix the problem. That's the kind of thing that enrages communities.
So one last question, because you keep using the word "we," and I asked this question a couple of times today, because I think you were back in the day, also in between there and now. I think you were one of the people, yourself and Julia Stoyce and some others, that convinced us, leading into new leadership in 2004 and 5, to lock the councillors in a room to say, what do we have in common with the mayor's campaign? What do we have in common with each other? What is it we want to do in the city? And also to do a big pre-budget, ask the city, what do we want as a city? Do a listening to Toronto type of facilitated exercise. I think you were part of the group that said, okay, you just made a big change in leadership. Do that at the beginning of the term. Is there out there in the community, amongst the agencies that turn to social planning Toronto, is there any willingness to go out to the community and make it clear to the community that is what we need to do? You all need to participate, because this is something councillors haven't done for 12 years. And if they say we're going to do it, you better show up.
Yeah, so we've felt that real lack for a long time, and the Social Planning Toronto convenes a network called Commitment
Yes.
Communities that is people who have lived experience of poverty and people who serve those folks and people from all across the city. And what they said last year is, we're tired of haggling with the budget committee over nickels and dimes about what didn't get funded. We want to talk about the city we want to build. And so we spent most of the last year doing exactly that exercise, going out to neighborhoods all across the city, talking to hundreds and hundreds of Torontonians. We presented the vision document that came from that to the executive committee during the report on the poverty reduction strategy just last month. People are coming forward by the score now, reinforcing those messages, reinforcing that need. We also put a student on the phone for about a month every year, calling every councillor on this city council, begging and pleading them to have open budget forums so their communities can participate in this discussion. And sadly, the number of councillors that do that goes down every year.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So we've taken that on, and we have brought forward that information, and the policies and priorities and programs that council has adopted but not funded very directly reflect what the communities are asking for in this process, which mirrors the process that you described.
Thank you, Sean.
Okay, thank you.
Next is Sheila Pizy Allen. I hope I'm pronouncing that last name correctly. There's a few extra people who have come after.
Sheila has a flu today, so I'm in her stead.
Okay.
My name's Jessica Bell. I'm with TTC Riders. We're a transit advocacy organisation that campaigns for a world-class and affordable public transit system. There's three key things that we'd like to see in this budget. One is full funding of the 2-hour fare transfer system rolled out as soon as possible. That'll allow transit riders to get on and off freely and to do local shopping and to do what they need to do, pick up their kids. It's ridership on the TTC is stagnant, and the 2-hour fare transfer is part of the ridership growth strategy. It's a great move forward. You've approved it, you need to fund it. 2, to roll out the first phase of the low-income pass. Once again, this has been approved, it just needs to be funded. There are thousands and thousands and thousands of transit riders who cannot afford to ride the TTC because their income is too low, or they're on social assistance and they just can't make ends meet, and this will help them get around and access the city. And finally, this is not in the budget, and we really think that it should be, and that is to address the overcrowding on the TTC. Over 50 transit routes on the TTC are overcrowded. They're violating standards the TTC and City Council has set, and the TTC needs more funding to increase service on those routes so that riders can get on and get to where they want to go on time. So they are the three key things: low-income pass, 2-hour fare transfers, and address the overcrowding. Thank you for your time today.
Thank you. Councillor Layton has a question.
Thank you very much. This goes to the overcrowding. You said there were 50 routes that are currently overcrowded.
Correct, and that's the TTC's data, and the Toronto Star reported on it maybe a month ago, and I can forward that around to the Budget Committee if you want to take a look.
Are these routes that are all downtown, or is this predominantly in one neighborhood in the community?
Good question. No, it's all across the city. All the streetcar routes are overcrowded, and there's a lot of routes, Stone Mills Road, and there's a lot of routes in Scarborough that are overcrowded as well. And what the TTC should do when a route is overcrowded is put more buses and streetcars on that route so that there's less people on each bus. But the TTC doesn't have the funding to do it, so there's more people left waiting.
Finch East.
Yes, no, it's a problem all across the city. Thank you for bringing that up.
One of my colleagues pointed out on Twitter the other day that they thought the 2-hour fare would benefit Bay Street subway riders spending $150 on lunch.
Yeah, I think
Yorkville.
we retweeted
Catch that one?
We did, and it might, but it's also going to benefit all the parents that pick up their kids and need to get on and off to pick up their kids or to go shopping at the supermarket. So, and by and large, the number of riders on the TTC, they tend to be lower income than drivers. They tend to be women. They tend to be people of colour. So they are the people that are going to be benefiting from the 2-hour fare transfer.
So let's just put this into some perspective that the number of individuals that are going to benefit from the saving of $3 that are spending $150 on lunch in Yorkville is likely probably small by comparison to the families that will be saving money when they go out shopping, to buy groceries, or to get to pick up their kids on their way home from school. That's actually like the best example, because I can tell you there's a lot of people that really hate getting off on their way home. They get off the subway, they walk over to school, then they got to get back on. They got to pay another $3. You suspect that number outnumbers the number of people dropping $150 at lunch?
Yeah, I'd say I know it does.
Just maybe a little bit.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Next is Daniela Mergerton.
Hello, councillors. I hope you haven't turned a deaf ear. I know it's been a long couple of days for you guys.
No, I'm sorry. I was just making another joke at Councillor Campbell's expense about the 2-hour time transfer.
Actually, I had made some notes because I'm actually here to speak on behalf of TTC and Fair Fare. I've been a member of Fair Fare for the last 8 years working in a low-income pass. But I've decided that I'm going to go as a free agent and speak of a number of issues that I'm facing and are very important to all of us. I'm sure you've heard everything I'm going to mention, but I'm going to give you a real story. I'm an abuse survivor, for one. So I know what food security means, and I thank the council for making that a priority, that children eat properly in food, because I've lived in poverty all my life. I lost my family due to violence, and I had never had a secure home. When I came to Toronto, I worked very hard in educating myself, going back to high school, etc. And I lived actually in Councillor Layton's ward for 44 years. I am now approaching seniorhood, and I was forced out of my neighborhood. I actually, and I also want to flag the tribunal. I keep speaking of the tribunal and how they do not really help people living in poverty. I shouldn't have lost my last fight. I fought it all the way to Superior Court and didn't seem to get justice. I always pay my rent. I'm clean. I volunteer in my community. And actually, I'm also a member of House League. I was women's representative at Sistering for 10 years, on the board for 6, and Voices from the Street, etc. And I took a report to United Nations in 2008, representing 300 women in shelters around poverty and homelessness, to poo-poo Canada for not listening to the UN. But what I want to say is I am now in Councillor Mahavik's ward. I am paying maximum rent, double the rent I was paying before, plus, and it's not hydro, it's gas. And I'm even afraid to unpack, and I actually do get a subsidy. I get a $175 for TTC, which I can't afford to buy a pass because 92% of my rent goes directly, 90% of what I get, I'm an ODSP recipient, goes directly into rent, which leaves me next to nothing if you figure that out for bills or food. I am just coming out of being very sick with pneumonia because the stress of having to leave a community, sorry, that I loved and felt safe in, has been very taxing. Anyway, I make it easy to find friends, but the thing is, I'm not secure where I am because even though I have a subsidy, it's something I fought for at City Council for many years, I still, they also now they're trying to raise the rent in some of the buildings by double what they're allowed to. So again, I'm asking that you guys look at the tribunal and what they're doing in terms of if I get a rent increase, it'll be $50. How long can I afford to live where I am? So I have no home security. And that in itself is very stressful. I do a lot of volunteer work. I try to make a difference in this world because of what I've lived by helping others. And with your help, hopefully we'll make some strides. I'm asking you, please, also to look at the poverty reduction piece. It's all related to health. And it's very important that people have a place to live. Also, there is the EPIC program. I spoke at the Mayor's Roundtable on housing. And shortly thereafter, they started what it stands for Early Prevention in Community. And I've had some issues with my subsidy twice now. But anyway, I have a friend who's now in a shelter. For some reason, there seems to be people, it's a pilot project for a year, and a lot of the councils don't know about it, and people don't seem to be able to use it. I'm asking that you guys look into that, because what I was experiencing when I was looking for housing was the whole issue of, again, TTC, going from one place to another, doctor's appointments, even going to social service agencies. We need that pass. We needed it yesterday. I really urge you to look at that TTC piece. It's huge for people in living in poverty, and also to look at the tribunal not allowing them to raise the rent to the point that I'm going to be homeless again. I'm not just talking about me. This affects everybody, right? And yeah, and I'm hoping that Councillor Layton, actually the old 14 division is up, and I'm hoping there will be subsidized units because I'm dying to go back to my hood.
Thank you.
I thank you for listening.
Councillor Carroll had a question.
Do people know, you know, because you have interacted and engaged with councillors a lot over the last,
and Pam,
particularly
too,
over the
right?
last
Yes.
8 years. So you know, but I know that you are a person who also easily talks to people in your neighborhood.
Yes.
Do most people know that because we don't live it, councillors don't know the shelter situation, and that if they've come to a locked door, that they really should, when they get through the night, at some point they should sit down and call their counselor and say, here's what just happened to me? Because we do still have the problem of a substantial number of my colleagues think, well, so we're at 95%. That means there's 5%. Yay. They don't, they actually don't know the story. It's not that they don't care, it's that they're not quite clear on what the experience is. Do you tell people? Call your counselor and tell them what you're living.
Yes, I do, and of course, you're going to hear people saying, well, you know, it doesn't make a difference, and I talk of my situation, how one person can make a difference. I was behind to try to challenge at the UN. I raised my own money, and I do have health issues. I want to stay healthy so that I can help you guys make a better Toronto. I love my city, and I love my community, and I tell everybody I can, and I do a lot of just in a moment kind of community service.
How do we make it clear to people? It's hard to say to people, please do this, because we're likely not going to be able to open a shelter and solve your problem tonight. A lot of times we hit a dead end as well. But each call leads to, in this room, everyone around the table knowing they need to do something.
Well,
How do we
I'm
make it
also
clear
a
to people,
member-
even if we don't solve your problem tonight, you've still got to tell us what's going on?
I'm also a member of C2C and Social Planning Toronto, and I think we need to get more people out and to see that things actually are moving when we're asking you, so that people have a, that they're going to say, yes, they will listen to us.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
And like a lot of people out there, like myself, we have a lot of skills. Employ some of us to help you do the work. Sorry, I know you want to go. The other thing about social service agencies, because I've been around and done a lot of work in it, we need to, social service agencies is almost the industry that's created on our poverty. And housing is the piece, right? I know you guys are struggling with that because shelters are just a Band-Aid treatment. Are not helping anyone. And I hate to see what's happened to Sister. I know you want to go.
You bet.
Anyway, God bless you guys. I know you have a tough job ahead of you. And just thank you for listening. Thank you, Counselor.
You bet.
Thank you. I
God
appreciate
bless.
you coming. Thank you.
Thank you.
We're going to go back. Jennifer Ho, who was one of the names on the list. I believe she's here now. Is Jennifer here?
Do I need to press? Oh, I guess I don't.
I think you're good.
Okay, sorry. I'm not really good at public speaking, so. Okay, so. Dear members of the Budget Committee, my name is Jennifer Ho, and I am one of the coordinators of the snack program at Niagara Street Public School. Unlike some of the speakers that have already spoken before you, I will be highlighting the importance of this program from a somewhat different perspective. My brother Stephen has been a dedicated volunteer at Niagara for the last 7 years. Each day, he gets up early in the morning and goes to school to prepare food for approximately 250 students of the school. Regardless of the weather, regardless if there's a snowstorm or severe weather warning, Stephen goes to school dutifully every day. In many ways, it is a thankless job that pays nothing. Aside from a caretaker and an ed assistant in the school, no one greets him every day. Because our program is somewhat small, our limited parental contributions and limited funding over the years from the city and the province means we have to monitor our spending. And due to the small size of our program, it isn't always viable to have food staple items delivered to us. So our weekends are spent shopping around the city, hauling heavy groceries, sometimes maybe 30, 40 pounds of groceries at a time from our home to the school. So you may sit there and wonder why we invest so much into the nutrition program. Stephen has autism and a mild intellectual disability. He graduated from the school board, and due to a lack of programming available for adults with developmental disabilities, this program is what gives Stephen purpose each day when he wakes up. Stephen has gained independence and life skills as a result of participating in this program. Every day, Stephen wakes up knowing that he has a purpose, a job to fulfill. When I was working at the school as an ed assistant, I assisted Stephen, and over the years now that my father has retired, he helps Stephen manage and run the program daily. We do all the paperwork, we do all the food prep of the day, we basically run the program. Our program has helped families that suffer from food insecurity, which I have personally witnessed when our program has had to supplement student lunches on numerous occasions, when parents send them to school with empty tummies and no lunch. Students in our program have been exposed to a different variety of foods that they might not necessarily be exposed to. So the program does make a difference, not just for those that are food insecure, but also for all the children, because it allows them access to healthy food each day. We've had kids try hummus for the first time, dragon fruit, Asian pears, whole wheat pitas. Those are just a couple of examples of some of the foods that our kids really love to eat. And again, because of the small size of our program, we do everything manually. We're slicing, 250 slices of cheese, sometimes twice a week, and so forth. As a sister, it breaks my heart when I see how our family, but more importantly, Stephen, is excluded from the school community, whether it's the annual potluck that the school holds every year. They utilize our facilities, but an invitation is never exceeded. We're never invited to the volunteer tea. But regardless of that, what Stephen has gained from the nutrition program is extremely important, while helping the whole school community eat healthier as a whole. Stephen has gained independence and has a sense of self-worth in his role in the snack program. He meticulously washes produce and ensures cracked vegetables do not get served at any given time. Once the snack has been prepared, he places it on the pickup cart, ready for students anxiously waiting to get their snack for the day. Afterwards, he begins to prep snack for the following day, and the cycle continues. So despite the enormous joint family effort we put forth in this program, the benefit of running the program for Stephen outweighs the negatives. On a few occasions, I've asked him, why do you do this every day? You have to wake up at 7 o'clock in the morning, and you have to get up and, out of your warm bed, and his answer is quite simple. I like to work at Niagara Street Public School because I get to make food for the kids to eat. Thank you very much, and unless you have any questions, I guess that's it.
Earl does.
Do you mind if I ask an extra question about Stephen?
Sure.
Because I have this experience at home. For adults with development disability, we don't have a lot of programs.
That's the problem.
Nor does anyone else. You're supposed to be cured when you're 18.
Yeah.
And not have anything.
That's the tragedy of it all. That's why we were very lucky. I was actually placed at Niagara School, and when one of the coordinators decided not to do it because it was a volunteer position, we quickly snagged onto it, and so Stephen's been running it for the last 8 years. It's a lot of work, but you know what? It gives him purpose, because if we didn't have this program running, what would he have, right?
Exactly.
He sits at home, and you can't watch TV. Everyone needs and deserves to have a purpose in life.
Yeah, yeah. So he can do this with a little bit of accommodation, and our funds going to the school board helps them to take care of something that otherwise it would be a problem in our court.
Yes.
Yeah. Thank you so much. Thank you, Jennifer.
Thank you.
Yeah.
We have 3 more deputants, and we have about 20 minutes, so we should be able to get done by 5. Next is Sarah McKinnon. Yes, we're back at 6 for our evening session.
Thank you for listening to everyone today, and for all the hard work you guys do every day. You've got some tough decisions to make. My name is Sarah McLennan. I don't know the number of my ward. I live at Bloor and Sherburne. I've lived in downtown Toronto for 51 years. I've seen a lot of change. I love this city, and what makes it great is the people. All the people. I was not planning to speak today, but I have been moved by everything I have heard, and if not now, when? I have a wish for Toronto that I wrote, and I hope, as you take back what you heard today, I hope it will help guide you in the decisions you have to make, the tough decisions, and as you mentioned earlier, in the city we want to build, as we figure out what that is. My wish is called the Good City Manifesto. This is our city. Imagine the city that could be, the people that would be, not one neighborhood, but many, not one revenue, but a few. Imagine what that could do. We are all connected, not one place, not one race, not one gender, not one belief. We are one city for everyone, every last human. We are bold. Addie Asti built his own stairs in the park. We are strong. David Stark made the streets safer. We are brave. Zoe Dodd saved lives in Moss Park. We help new Canadians find their way. We share the right to live and breathe and enjoy this great city, the right to shelter, the right to parks, the right to safe streets, the right to get around town, the right to grow, the right to build a business, the right to change the status quo, the right to live, the right to truth, the right to be heard, the right to leave a better world for our kids and a better city, the right to work together to build a better city. Let's make decisions based on facts and people, not power. The city belongs to all of us. I believe in the heart of this city. How about you? Thank you.
I love your ending.
Thank you, that was nice.
Yay.
Next is Sharon Howarth.
Hi, yes, my name is Sharon Howarth, and I'm sorry there's a counselor missing. Very important, but,
There's a number of them watching on TV.
oh, is there?
Yes.
Right. Well, I've spoken to Councillor Burnside before, and I would have loved to have him here. But anyway, so I'm a resident of Ward 30, and thanks for letting me have this opportunity to speak to you. The last July, the full council, all of the members of the council voted to support the Transform TO program. And so my thought would be, like, if you support the program, you have to also support the funding that goes along with that program. Otherwise, I don't know, what does it mean? So the Transform TO is looking for the full funding of $2.5 million and for the budget of this year. And so the only thing that makes sense to me is that you support it for the program, well, you got to support the money that goes along with it. And to be honest with you, so I'm here again about climate change, and the climate issue, I've been familiar with it for about 12 years, but sometimes it just goes over my head. I think, what does it mean again, Sharon? Because I've been hearing about, we've heard forever about, you know, Bangladesh and the small island states and the high temperatures in the Middle East and Egypt and on and on. But so I have to be honest, like it's not an encouraging picture, so I tend to forget. But this has brought it full frontal for me once again. So I know that you've probably seen this before, but there. This is a Toronto report, and this has to be in every councillor's office, because otherwise, you know, I don't understand you can make decisions without keeping this in mind. So the Toronto heat alerts by 2040, like, this is real. Increase to 66 days, and actually that number is wrong. It should be 32 degrees of 66 days, but the high is 44. The rainfall for, let's say, the Lakeshore flood was 123 millimeters. We're looking at 166 millimeters. You know, and again, this has got to be in every councillor's office. They can't make any decisions without always referring to that. So I've been working on years on this climate issue, and I hear a lot of stories. One of the groups that I'm with at the city level is Climate Fast. And so I've spoken to people where the Lakeshore flood, you'll see pictures of it tonight, but I told him, I said, I have to repeat it. He was in a basement apartment during the flood. His basement flooded. He'll show you pictures of the bottom part of his freezer, the fridge. The crisper is filled with sewage. And my daughter was going to be moving into that area. A couple of days ago, I've also spoke to a student recently who used the Etobicoke Library to do her studies. And on the floods, the Lakeshore floods, which floods other parts of the cities, her library was flooded in Etobicoke, and she was not able to carry on her studies there for a number of days. These are people that I met that I spoke to. So another neighbor said during the ice storm of 2013, a tree came crashing down in her backyard, but also affected not only her home, the neighbor's home. That ended up costing her $1,000. Another woman said she was trying to reach her mother during the ice storm, who lived in a different part of the city, is disabled. And it took, she said, I was lucky. It only took me 4 hours to get there, but you know, there were streets that were blocked off, there were trees in the middle of the streets, et cetera, et cetera. And then this one, I just heard a couple of days ago, up in the York Finch not York Finch, Young Finch area, the man had a beauty salon. And during the flooding, the lakeshore flooding, his salon flooded. The insurance refused to cover it, and he lost his business. I said, you've got to go talk to the people in North York when they have their deputations. So losing your business. The other thing that, the reason I support the Transform TO to such extent as well is that it's the employment possibilities. 300, we get that program going for those years. We've got the potential, we at Toronto, the potential of 327,000 person years of employment. We have a housing problem, you get the employment, that'll help that. You have a poverty problem, you get the employment, that'll help that. And that Transform TO covers all of that. They need 2,500,000, right? Just for this year. And they needed more than that, but because it wasn't fully funded last year, we're down in the amount that they need for this year. This has got counselors, and you, the budget people, sir, the budget people, you have the power. I can come and speak to you, but you are the people with the power to make this happen. Think of the economics of this as well, please, the jobs that are available under this program.
Stay tuned. Thank you.
Thank you. Come on, give me some questions. No, it's okay.
Oh, questions?
Thank
Yes,
you.
sorry.
No.
Councillor Carroll.
Well, I just wanted to make sure that you're aware, because I think with flooding, it's all sort of relative to where you live. So you refer to them as the lakeshore floods. In my ward is the highest point above sea level in all of Toronto, Seneca Hill. And it was the #1 flooded area in the 2005 flood. #1.
Wow.
So it's not really about the lake. It's that. It's extreme weather. Yeah. Thanks.
Have this, please make the recommendation to post this in all councillor offices.
Thank you. So the last deputation for the afternoon.
Thank you.
Is Adina Lebo.
Yeah. Thank you very much for incorporating me. I wasn't on the list, but I got on. So I am Adina Lebo. I'm the ambassador for CARP Toronto, and I am part of the Toronto Seniors Forum here at City Hall, as well as the head of the Seniors Committee for C2C. You've heard a lot from the C2C people who've been here. It's a loose coalition of up to 93 different agencies and nonprofit organizations that get together for poverty reduction strategy and other strategies. And I've spent the day here today, and I was just, the way the budget was designed this year is just not appropriate, given all the promised strategies voted on by council this year. We've heard just today about housing challenges and shelter challenges, homelessness, poverty reduction, child poverty, TO reform, and the senior strategy and transit, just to name a few. These are all essential programs and services. They were all voted on by councillors and unanimously approved, and now they're not even in the budget and the funding. Now we're all here today fighting for peanuts, and as Councillor Carroll said, it's like putting everything in your shopping cart and then not going to the checkout and not paying for it. Please don't make us choose between all these essential programs when, as a group council, you are our voted and elected representatives, haven't looked at introducing and using your revenue tools. Last year, the Association for Public Policy and KPMG, at staff request, did studies on all the revenue tools and looked at what other cities were doing as a model for Toronto. and using the money to fund some of these essential programs. Toronto, we learned, is leaving hundreds of millions of dollars on the table, and this would fund rather than have a process of us fighting for peanuts and you making choices. It would give us the ability to fund different projects and different programs so that the people of Toronto would benefit. We also need to do this a different way. I heard Councillor Carroll say that we need to have consultations before we devise the budget. We have to have councillors meet with each other and establish priorities. And in order for them to do that exercise, they would have to meet with their constituents. And here, wow, what a concept. This would be really, really great to do before, so that we would not be in the position that we're put in. And you're put in this position too, yesterday, today, and tomorrow. We have to include the strategies and make the priorities, and when the councillors go to their people, they would see it. An election is coming up, and we need leadership and vision, without a doubt. I can tell you that at CARP and through the Toronto Seniors Forum, we're going to be asking our members to invite councillors and all the runners going for seats in for a cup of tea. And we're going to ask them to ask the different people what are they going to do if they get elected. We need to do something different, because if we only do what we've always done, we'll always get what we've always got, and it's really not good enough for the City of Toronto. It's my city. I was born here. I live here. I want my city to be a model for the rest of the country. So thank you very much for listening, and please go back to the revenue tools. Every one of those strategies that has been left out is essential for the growth of this city. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So, is there anybody else that wanted to speak? We have probably room for one more speaker if there's... Yeah, we can come up. We can sneak one more in before the break.
Very lucky me. I'd signed up on Monday, but I wasn't clear as to whether or not it should be the Wednesday day or the Wednesday evening. But if this can save a little bit of your time in the evening, thank you. I'm lucky. For the time and impact, yes, I'd likely be more lucky with going to the credit rating agencies maybe, but to be a bit fair, it's also Ontario and the national government, the national level too, that is profligate in some ways. So we have massive numbers involved in our budget, and is there any interest in squeezing the billions? I hope so, and it's too bad that you've set up a can't find a climate change thing for relative pennies to help get people working on that versus a large-scale economies and waste. And very specifically, well, no, before a general thing as well, we should distinguish between spending and investment. Far too often, I think we're having transit spending and not so much investment. Investment in smart transit, we need it, and a few bike lanes, smart. Segments thereof, including, and also maintenance is a smart investment. Spending can be things like subway extensions into a sprawled area whilst building and rebuilding roads in the core, and that's about opposite of what other cities are doing in the world. So the suspect subway extension, in my mind, is very clearly suspect, and that's not good spending. It's much more of a waste. Where did that good cartoon go? I'll dig it up. Most experts will not support the Scarborough subway extension, and the slim majority that we have is in favor of creating trouble, I think, and yes, we need to spend money in Scarborough. I'm not saying don't spend the money on transit nor transit in Scarborough, but if we're wanting to squeeze the billions, going back to the LRTs and another thing with the Gatineau busway, the Gatineau corridor using it for busway, I think that's a real way to provide effective transit for Scarborough in a much faster way than this one-stop subway extension, which I'm sorry, it's not going to be probably merely a 3.35 billion, but much more like a 3.5 or maybe a 4 billion or whatever, especially when you start opening up things underground. So let's reverse away from this Scarborough subway extension and spend a couple of millions to have a thorough look and guidance on our transit schemes done by the American Public Transit Association, or UITP. That's a European version. They have consultants. They farm themselves out as consultants. They are hireable, and there's no chance of a Webster effect. They'd likely say our priorities are really wrong and urge that some sort of heavy spending go where demand is, and that might mean King Street or Queen Street or somewhere downtown and the overall corridor, and also the Yonge Street needing real relief. And I'm sorry, I'm a little bit suspect of that thing called the relief line. It's only a segment of what was proposed a while back, and it's much more of a belief line, I think, than actual effective transit at this point in time, if we get there. I'd also urge that if we do have real funding issues, the city of Curitiba had a cash crunch. They went with busways and political will, and they got a set of busways connected, a good network. They kept expanding on it. They move the same capacity of a subway for about 1% of the cost. That's a humongous savings if we have the political will and the space. So that's why in Scarborough terms, I think that Gatineau Hydro Corridor could be a could be a wonderful spine, although I know it needs to be massaged properly. There's the trying to be proactive. Even in Scarborough terms alone, I think we could actually do surface connections and spend the billion of the Scarborough subway extension in much better way to improve the connectivity through the lower core, even getting up to York Mills Road there. So in terms of other funding things, if we actually had the full user pay for vehicles, the Scarborough subway extension might not be such a bad idea, but we don't have anywhere near the appropriate user pay for vehicles. This is from, 2 years ago. There was a great paragraph from the Globe 20 years ago that figured out every, I keep bringing this around, every car, they figured out in Vancouver, every car had $2,700 per car per year worth of subsidies, about 7 times more than what they subsidize public transit. So that's about $2.7 billion a year. In Toronto, those are some old stats from the Sierra Club. Another old study figured we could really lower property values, property taxes by charging for the motorists for their costs. So having $200 a vehicle of a vehicle registration tax, that may not be popular in some circles, but it would be fair and logical. Not that logic necessarily enters into things. So I hope we can do that. And we can't rely on the property taxes so much and the real estate fee, or pardon me, the real estate transfer tax. Things may go down. And we've had such inflation in the housing, I think we need to have like a 10% property tax hike, because that's only, the inflation in housing has been what, 40%? Let's be honest about it.
Thanks, Hamish. Thank you. We are now.
Just a quick question. I know we're in a hurry, but you raised the prevailing upon the UITP for consultation services. I'm not on the commission anymore, but I know we're real good at availing ourselves of their conferences to, gets us to Singapore and Helsinki and Germany and God knows where all. I can't think of an instance where we ever asked them to just come to us and do consulting for us. Have you looked into this? Is that a common practice in North American transit systems, and we're just not doing it?
I think it's fairly common. I haven't looked into it as much as I would like to, but certainly the American Public Transit Association has proffered advice from time to time. I believe maybe in the more distant past when Toronto was looked up to for being a good example. But more recently, no, I don't think it'd be a great idea and well worth the money. If we're spending billions, hello, what's $1 million? It's nothing, or $2 million,
right?
Or 3, or 5. Please
if
do
you
it.
get better bang for your buck.
Yeah, and it's for everybody in the city. It's for the transit users in Scarborough. It's for the transit users of the city. It's for the taxpayers everywhere.
Thank you.
On that, thank you. We are right at 5 o'clock. We're going to actually, we're adjourned. I have to do a quick procedural motion that the Budget Subcommittee for City Hall, Scarborough Civic Center, North York Civic Center consultations received for information, the public presentations, and the communications submitted by members of the public. All in favor? Opposed? That's carried. We'll begin the evening session at 6 p.m.
Wow. Councilor Carroll, I just want to say how much